I just Ready? All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, July 16th, 2024 at 5:40. We have full attendance. All board members are present. I want to welcome those of you watching at home and those of you that have joined us in person tonight. The Wake County Board of Education meetings are held for the purpose of conducting the official business of the board, and the public is welcome, invited to attend these meetings to observe the board as it conducts its official business. Persons who willfully interrupt, disrupt, or cause disturbances at an official meeting may be directed to leave by the presiding officer. Members of the audience should show respect for speakers, even those they disagree with, by refraining from loud comments or other disruptions. Disruptions by any person or persons of a public meeting will be subject to action in accordance with North Carolina General Statute 143 through 1817. All right. We have established a quorum. I think everyone has taken their seat. Now that we've taken a seat, I'm going to ask if you're able to all stand as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. So we'll begin our meeting, as we always do, with our superintendent's comments. Dr. Robert Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. The 24-25 school year is now officially underway as our multi-track and year-round schools are now back in session. I had the privilege of kicking off the school year last Monday at Woods Creek Elementary, a brand-new school in Holly Springs, welcoming students for the first time. It was a joy to see the excited students and their families make their way into this beautiful state-of-the-art facility. Our multi-track year-round schools allow us to maximize the use of our school buildings in high-growth areas, just one way we are good stewards of the resources provided by our local taxpayers. There's every indication that the 24-25 school year is off to a good start, and I'm excited to witness the strides we will take together as a school district. And as I say all the time, the Wake County Public School System is second to none, and I can't say how excited I am to be here at the beginning of the school year. This new school year presents an opportunity for us to build our successes and get even better. I have every confidence that great things are in store for our students, families, and staff members in the 24-25 school year. Here's to a school year filled with challenges, met goals achieved, and progress that we will make. Next, I'd like to congratulate Whitney Bickelhop of Buckhorn Creek Elementary on being named the Wake County Public Schools Outstanding Mathematics Teacher of the Year. Principals were asked to nominate an outstanding math teacher from their school, and Mrs. Bickelhop was selected as the winner by committee that was made up of members of the academic advancement team. Her commendation read, in part, she embodies the essence of an exceptional elementary math educator. Through her passion and expertise, she cultivates continuous engagement and inspires a love for mathematics among her students. Mrs. Bickelhop, who has taught math in our district for 16 years, uses a variety of visual models and strategies to help students grasp math concepts and encourages them to engage in productive struggle to develop problem-solving skills. Her principal, Daniel Simmons, says the following. She fosters a classroom atmosphere where students feel empowered to take risk. She will be recognized at the North Carolina Council of Teacher of the Mathematics State Conference in Winston-Salem later this year. Math can be a challenging subject for many students, but teachers like Mrs. Bickelhop demonstrate that any student, and I repeat that, any student can learn math concepts with the right teaching strategies and the right attitude. It's important for teachers not only to set high expectations for their students, but also to make sure they give their students the skills and encouragement needed to reach them. So Mrs. Bickelhop embodies that idea, and we want to say congratulations on this well-deserved recognition. Lastly, I want to encourage all of you to make a contribution to this year's Tool for Schools Community Supply Drive organized by our friends at Wake Ed Partnership. Tools for Schools was launched in 2022 to provide classroom materials free of charge to our teachers. Since then, the program has given away more than $1 million worth of new school supplies. This past school year long, more than 8,000 teachers representing all of our nearly 200 schools shopped at Tools for Schools. A survey found that the Wake County teachers can spend upwards of $1,000 per year out of their own pockets to buy supplies for classrooms for their students that are in need. Tools for Schools eliminates or at least greatly reduces that burden on our hardworking teachers. So I feel strongly that Tools for Schools, in addition to the saving teachers money, has reduced their stress and reminded them just how valued they are. They can only serve to make them more effective educators and more likely to stay in the profession. To support this worthy program, you can drop off donations at any designated location, including all Staples stores within Wake County. Financial contributions are also greatly appreciated. So again, visit wakeed.org/tools for schools to find drop-off locations or to make financial donations. So again, thank you in advance for your support. The last thing I want to do is to thank our board chair who was able to deliver a message at our recent State of the City, County, and Schools event. I can tell you that I've shared this particular video with our staff, and I encourage you all to visit our website to see this. He did a wonderful job in representing both the wonderful things that we do as a school district and the tremendous amount of support that we need in order to be an outstanding district, not only in this state, in this nation. But so, Chair Haggerty, thank you for that. It was outstanding. You did a wonderful job, and I'll turn it back to you. Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Not so good that I can do all my meetings by video, though, right? Well, thank you all. I did have the opportunity to attend the Greater Raleigh Chamber of Commerce's State of the City, County, and Schools. And, without replaying that entire 20-minute presentation, I'll give you what we used to call the Cliff Notes version. I understand a new product has replaced Mr. Cliff. But generally, we have a lot of great things going on in Wake County and our schools. And don't judge me for knowing what Cliff Notes are. We do have wonderful and great CTE programs that we're developing, a lot of great partnerships made possible through Wake Technical Community College, with our early colleges, with our dual enrollment programs, and then all of the programs that are taking place in our schools. So many of our high schools now have their career academies, where they're taking special courses from engineering to finance, culinary arts, hospitality, video game design. It's really amazing to see the job preparation we're doing. The new schools that are coming online to accommodate growth in Wake County, all of this made possible by the support from our county commissioners, who really have been great partners these last few years with us to address the challenges of growth. Our benchmarks compared to other districts in our academic performance, numerous awards, our graduation rate, scholarships, the students that we have, and the amount of public service hours they put in giving back to the community are really outstanding. But of course, it's not fair to shine a light only on the good. We need to acknowledge the challenges. And we've been hearing about the challenges. Many of you have come to us to talk about these challenges, the problems that we're having in this nationwide crisis around bus drivers. This is a nationwide, this is a statewide crisis, but that doesn't matter. We've got to address it here locally. And we're trying as a board several strategies to do the best we can with that. Strategies for filling our HVAC positions and our maintenance positions. We know that when the HVAC goes out, it disrupts learning, it disrupts lives, our staff's lives, our family lives, any day lost because you've had to go out of school, you've had to get out of work to pick up your kids. That disrupts everybody, and it's a preventable problem. But it's one that's challenging when we don't have the number of available workers in the workforce, period, let alone those willing to work for the salaries that we're currently able to offer. And of course, one of the biggest questions is that while we get our awards and recognitions and accolades, we have to be honest that there are students that we are not serving well. And that has to be our priority. Whether they're not getting the amount of engagement, the amount of challenges, or the resources that they need, that has to be addressed, and that's our promise to educate every student and give every student in Wake County a quality education. So you've just saved yourself 20 minutes by putting up with that remark. That's the gist of my comments, but I did want to share them with you for that. Now, if today's a little bit muted, it's because I wasn't sure how to address current events, because I want to do it respectfully, and I also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of really charged political feelings and thoughts and emotions in the country right now. And I want to make the distinction, and I'm not assigning any blame, I'm not making any excuses. I do want to say that we've seen a real coarsening of civility, of public attitude toward government and public service. We've seen the defacement and vandalism of our Capitol. We've seen calls for lynching of public officials. We've heard public officials talk about, some people need killing. But that does not compare to the murder and attempted murder of individuals and candidates at our political functions as part of our political system. All of us as Americans should be ashamed that it's come to this. And I know that personally, I'm going to do better in all of my conversations and in my treatment of others. And I would just ask all of you to reflect on that individually. What can you do to make things better? America has been the jewel of the world's democracy. And I know I'm getting emotional about this, but in a previous job, I would have judges and scholars from other countries come to North Carolina to learn about our justice system, to learn about our democracy, to learn about the peaceful transfer of power and how we've managed to do this in a nation with so many personal freedoms. And we have maintained that for over 2 centuries. Incidents like we saw in Pennsylvania threaten to disrupt that entire system. You might wonder why I'm bringing this up now, and you might wonder what this has to do with any of you. And I just say, as Americans, we all have to do better. So thank you. Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Chair Haggerty, for issuing the call to each and every one of us. I don't think there's anything else I can say other than to remind us that regardless of our opinions, our distinctions, and our similarities, we are still one United States, and so thank you for the call to action to all of us. And again, I was going back and forth with what I was going to say, so I'm actually glad I went after you, so I didn't have to read my scribble over here, so thank you very much. But I will lighten the mood and say you still should watch the 20-minute video, because I meant to make, for those of you who had young kids recently, I wanted to make a flat Chris in honor of Flat Stanley, like where in the world is Chris, because hint, he travels throughout the district throughout the 20-minute video. So if you haven't watched it, you should. I told Dr. Taylor I would have never been able to do what you did. It was very well done. Our attention span is this long. People were captivated the entire 20. I've not been in a room where people were captivated by a film when they could talk to their neighbor in a room that large, but every single person. Dr. Taylor and I were almost laughing because we were like, people are engaged. They were actively listening. So job well done to you and to the team that made it look very professional. So thank you very much. You made my job easy to be on the panel because you did an excellent job of doing exactly what you said, talking about our successes, but also being very open about our challenges and how we know that both of those are acknowledging those are the only way forward to continue to ensure that we move to what we want to be, which is the best choice for all families in Wake County. So thank you very much for noting that. I will just echo Dr. Taylor on Tools for School, another stand-in I did for you, Chair. Hopefully I did you justice. Luckily, you don't have to watch my video. But again, please, if you will, and also for educators who are listening, Staples was also proud to acknowledge to us the discount they're giving to our teachers in Staples. And I am not an early riser, so I don't generally watch the morning news before I leave. So when I got there, I was very surprised to see that there were shoppers in the store because they saw it, the preview for Staples' grand unveiling of the partnership with Wake Ed Partnership. So there were people in the store shopping that morning. My favorite is a lady said, please don't put me on camera. My family don't know I'm here spending money, but I love buying school supplies. She has no children or grandchildren. But so again, the partnership in Wake County, again, it's a gentle reminder that even when we feel overwhelmed and really worried about how we look what our persona is to the community, there's always those small jewels to remind us that people truly, truly do pay attention and are still endeared by Wake County Public Schools. And that's what that moment meant to me that morning, to see people saying, I saw it on the 5:30 a.m. news and I'm here to shop for Wake County Public School students. And so again, thank you to those of you who do rise early enough to watch the news to beat Dr. Taylor and I to the store to start shopping. So thank you again, and thank you for everyone in Staples for our partnership with Wake Ed, for our relationship with Wake Ed Partnership. It was my pleasure to stand in your stead that day. And lastly, many of you will remember we acknowledged Mr. Perry, who was long-term principal of Fuller Elementary School. His wife and his family was here, and I received a call from several of his family members today. And so I said I would say that here and acknowledge that a giant from Wake County Public School at the age of 21 passed away today, and it was also he and his wife's 69th or 70th wedding anniversary as well. So please keep the Perry family in your hearts and prayers. And again, another reminder that I didn't know Mr. Perry when he was a principal, but they certainly see us as their extended family, and wanted to make sure that I passed on his transition to our board and to the public. And so I will end with saying just that regardless of who we are still neighbors. And by our mere connection of this school district, it makes us extended family. And so hopefully we continue to remember that when we disagree, that we can still do it with civility. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We'll change our order up a little bit. He's still writing, so I won't call him Mr. Swanson. I'll switch over to Ms. Rice.
Thank you, Chair Haggerty. Happy 24-25 school year to our year-round students. I have the faith that their year began with a very productive start. I want to give a round of applause to Granville Johnson and the Office of Equity Affairs team on their Helping Hand Summer Camp's end of camp presentations. I enjoyed seeing students present what they learned during the week-long camp. Their reading skills were strong on display, and they did an excellent job sharing about prominent people that make significant contributions to our country. This week's wellness dimension is financial wellness. Plan and budget your back-to-school expenses. As we enter the new school year with new expenses and reminiscing on the summer months filled with vacations and end-of-summer travels, I encourage you to take a deep breath and do what you can. Creating a budget helps managers cost effectively and reduce financial stress. Here are some suggestions that may be helpful. Make a list of all necessary school supplies, clothing, and our extracurricular fees. This helps to prioritize spending and avoid unnecessary purchases. Remember to stay cool from the weather and your head when managing your budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Next, we'll go to Ms. Caulfield.
Thank you. So we have this Title IX policy coming before us today, and even though the courts enjoin this new Title IX proposal rule, there's confusion and clarity on what this means now and what it'll mean to our families going forward. But I'm going to go ahead and I'll share some of my original comments because no matter how it pans out, it is still what I'm hearing from families and still what I feel is right. So all the women, grandmothers, aunts, even fathers, husbands should be appalled that these proposed changes to Title IX. Redefining sex is a political agenda. This new rule to Title IX undermines the very thing it was set up to do. Women fought hard for these rights. It absolutely erodes the foundation and its purpose and removes the very protections it was created to foster. I think about how we say that we want these people to stay, our families, to stay in public schools. There's a lot of talk about opposing opportunity scholarship vouchers for families that are seeking other opportunities for their children, yet we keep bringing polarizing policies to the table. This policy will not only cause harm to our children, but cause confusion for our children as they are looking to us for leadership and protection. I am confused by our advice to keep pushing this. I'm not sure why. There is, well, I guess there's conflict that we should be pursuing this August 1st date. I guess everything is still kind of up in the air. So I'll kind of brush past that one. I'm not sure why we would keep moving forward, not knowing what the lawsuit will hold and how it will look possibly when it goes on further. There are several plaintiffs in the group that have some kind of protective rule with the preliminary injunction, and therefore it makes it a lot more difficult to even implement. I wonder if we will be at risk for liability like Loudoun County, which is now being sued for $30 million for that poor girl, the second girl that was harmed in a bathroom. What about our biological female students that feel afraid of going into the bathroom to join sports, or to worry about their scholarship possibilities now being at risk, afraid to sign up for field trips, not knowing who will be sleeping in their bed or room? And yes, that has happened. Why would we put our children at risk in a possible bad situation? This can be a bad situation for all involved. This is not a matter of being pro, against, or having anything to do with a particular person. It is just all of our children. It's putting them in a precarious situation. It's not healthy and it's not right. I'm disappointed that our leaders have not stood up for the 99% biological female students. When do their rights count? What about their well-being? When is that important? How about their safety being valued? And when do they have a voice? When do they matter? And when do they get to say, I just don't feel safe? Instead of proposing to punish them for using pronouns incorrectly, which, by the way, it's not proper English. Ironically, the very thing that we're in business to do is to teach proper English. We need more emphasis on literacy and not using incorrect pronouns, like they and them. I'm sorry, it just refers to multiple people. It's not proper English. It's confusing. Instead of prioritizing these types of policies, I think we need to put focus on academics. We have a lot to talk about there, or improving safety for our students. This policy puts our kids all at risk and in precarious situations. We are not listening to the very kids who we claim to protect. We have a student that has come before us and asked us for single-stall bathrooms for their safety. I totally get that. Allowing biological boys in girls' bathrooms is wrong and dangerous. Loudoun County families can attest to that. And these examples that I'm providing are because it's a possibility if we allow this policy to go through the way it's worded, vague, not giving definitions of what we mean by this. It absolutely could be things that come before our board. We're allowing biological boys in girls' locker rooms. That's wrong, it's dangerous, intimidating, it's uncomfortable, and provokes great upset. Allowing biological boys in girls' sports is dangerous. Peyton McNabb can attest to that. Allowing biological boys in beds on overnight trips, it's ridiculous, and I cannot even believe that we're even considering this. And God forbid somebody asks about it or raises a question, it's considered wrong that they ask the question, who is sleeping with them? No wonder these kids are confused. Look at our leadership. We spend all this time changing and creating policies, but my whole time on this board, I do not recall us discussing how we will work on implementing them, how we will create consistency that helps everyone know where we stand and what we expect, or how to follow up on these policies to make sure that they're even effective, or if they're working in the way that we intended. We are addressing this discrimination, harassment, bullying policy how many times in the past few months? We did the dress code, the Crown Act, and now Title IX with boys in all of these different situations. But in the 19 months that I've been in this role, I have pretty much begged us to listen to the families and address this policy in regards to bullying, which is severely harming our youth, along with other aspects like discipline issues, which are also harming our students, that we know is an issue in the classroom. We're still not talking about bullying and discipline. That affects each and every one of our children, regardless of how they identify. They identify as victims, and nobody is rushing to make a stronger policy or an implementation procedure on how to improve what we are doing to help them. And I know they said it's coming, but I am mad that we keep getting distracted from what the families are telling us are important to us. We do not listen. And then we act shocked when we leave or when they leave or want opportunity scholarships to find somewhere else for their children, that they don't have to swallow this polarized, political, adult-driven agenda. We can do better, and I will no vote as long as this is on the table. My vote will be no. It is a convenience to be in a public school, to be a public school family. Door-to-door transportation, sports clubs, scholarship opportunities. We have so much to offer. Parents forego all of that with going to a private or charter to ensure that their kids have a well-rounded education. We need to listen to that. You want the parents of Wake County to stay or to come back? They want better math. They want their kids to be able to read. And they are not just barely passing at 60%. It is imperative to a well-rounded life, and they want life skills. That's what our parents want, and that's what their kids need. I have read about this, and the final CAS study and the NHS England response, and even the New York Times just came out on July 12th with information about how gender-affirming care does not help and sometimes causes more harm. So I know that that's going to be something that somebody is going to say, that I'm not caring about the suicide or their well-being. So I want them to know that there are plenty of studies out there about these children and what's happening to them. So I am actually begging everybody to vote no, to keep our children safe and to stop polarizing policies that do not aid in learning. And I'll be voting no for these policy changes, attempts to redefine sex, and I hope collectively that we will reconsider this notion. Thank you.
All right. So next, we'll go to Mr. Swanson.
I'll wait.
If you were ready, I apologize.
Oh, no, thank you, Chair Haggerty. And thank you for your remarks. I think you summed up my thoughts as well, so thank you. A couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to attend the Young Entrepreneur Business Fair, which was hosted by the Big Brother Big Sister and the leaders for hosting this event, which was able to give young entrepreneurs and our students and staff a great opportunity. It was also the MC was Mayor Jock Gilbert from Apex, and I think I missed you by a couple of hours, Chair Haggerty, which you probably didn't wave the heat like I did.
To be fair, it was 100 degrees.
Yes,
so.
it was. So I had the opportunity of really listening and learning from these students, to hearing their businesses and what they have, and it was a great opportunity, and looking forward to attending next year's event as well. Lastly, I just want to highlight an all-call opportunity that will be taking place at Cary High School. Mrs. Haywood and the Cary High PTA will be hosting a Cary High Grounds Cleanup Day on Saturday, August the 3rd from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. For more details and to sign up, you can contact Cary High or visit the school PTA Facebook page. I will be out there with my cleanup attire, and I think I even signed up to do a couple of weed eating and grass. So I know Commissioner Stallings will be there, and so I hope that the public will join us as we give the students of Cary High a great welcome to the 24-25 school year. So that concludes all of my remarks for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. We'll come back around this way. Ms. Mahaffey, are you ready?
I have no comments.
We will go then to Ms. Edmonds.
Thank you. On June 21st, I had the pleasure of going to Westlake Elementary to spend time with their 2 school counselors to learn about their ramp designation. We've said it before, but it's worth repeating. The work of our school counselors has a direct positive impact on academics and student well-being. I'm in awe of all that they do across the districts, but I do want to extend a special shout out to Ms. Johnson and Ms. Lee for taking so much time with me that day. On June 25th, I went to the drive-through graduation for tracks 2, 3, and 4 at Holly Springs Elementary. And as we know, as Ms. Rice mentioned, our year-round schools have since started their new school year. So a shout out to my District 5 year-rounds, Holly Springs Elementary, Westlake Elementary and Westlake Middle, Middle Creek Elementary, and Centennial Magnet Middle starts next week. So I wish all of them a happy new school year as well. Chair Haggerty, I really appreciate your comments about the violent events of Saturday, and I would just like to add that I'm in agreement that there's no place for this in our country, and I believe that Saturday's tragedy reminds us that it is always time to talk about common sense gun laws for America. No civilian has any business owning these types of military-grade weapons, AR-15s, bump stocks, explosives, etc. But what are our leaders doing about it, and what will we demand that they do about it? Some other recent political violence involving guns, Steve Scalise in 2017. Others were also shot and injured at that particular shooting. Federal Judge Esther Salas in 2020. Her husband and son were gunned down in their home by a man who felt wronged by the judge. Her son died of his injuries, and her husband was shot 3 times and underwent multiple surgeries. Congresswoman Gabby Giffords in 2011, 6 people died of gunshot wounds at that event, and 12 were injured at that same event, in addition to the injury that she suffered. And Giffords said just yesterday, political violence, quote, political violence is un-American and is never acceptable, never, end quote. I agree with her. It is absolutely un-American, but what are we doing about it? School boards don't govern gun laws, but we do have the power to contribute in other ways for a safer America. We can continue pushing for more counselors, social workers, school psychologists in our schools, continue supporting restorative justice practices, and teaching kids how to handle conflict in healthy, nonviolent ways, teaching kids how to be kind to one another, modeling civility in response to conflict. That's how I see K-12 education contributing to a safer America. Let this board lead by example and do what's within our power to promote nonviolence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. We'll next go to Dr. Ring.
Good evening. First, I would like to welcome our year-round students back to school. I hope that everyone had a chance to get a well-deserved break this summer. First day of school is always a little overwhelming, but I am hoping that after a week, everyone is settled into a routine. I do look forward to returning to visit with some of the schools in District 3 and meeting a few of the new principals and assistant principals there. Also, I am eager to get back to the table in the coming months to continue working on the budget with my colleagues on the board. We remain fully committed to increasing pay for our hardworking teachers and bus drivers. And as Chair Haggerty mentioned, the events in Pennsylvania this past weekend and the tragic loss of life was really a wake-up call for many of us. It was definitely for me, regardless of one's view of the world or political leanings. We should still be able to discuss our differences in a civilized manner. Violence and destruction of property are never the answer. My prayers go out to the family of Corey Comparatori, who died while shielding his wife and daughter from the shooter's bullets. His daughter calls him a superhero for sacrificing himself to protect her. Many of you are here tonight because you too are trying to protect your children. The proposed changes to our policies prohibiting discrimination, harassment, and bullying were prompted by the new Title IX rules issued by the Department of Education. There are multiple lawsuits across the country challenging these new rules, and there is a preliminary injunction that may have some impact here in Wake County. But let me be clear on one thing. No one is for discrimination and harassment. However, we do have to consider the main thing. Who are we trying to protect? What was the original intent of Title IX? I have two daughters, one of whom is a competitive swimmer. So I am deeply concerned about the impact that Title IX changes may have on women's sports as she goes on to participate as she gets older. It is my understanding that the specific Title IX regulation addressing sports has not been put forth by the Department of Education. But the current proposed rules may still be up for interpretation because, as it says, quote, preventing any person from participating in an education program or activity consistent with their gender identity will subject them to more than de minimis harm on the basis of sex. So because of this, a whole set of questions come to my mind. When the definition of sex no longer means boy, girl, man, woman, how do we properly protect our daughters who are athletes? Does this impact the chance of a female swimmer or runner being competitive if she has to compete with someone who is biologically stronger and faster? If she is involved in a contact sport, will she be subject to increased risk of physical harm competing against a male? How will this impact her emotional well-being? These are fair questions to ask. And if she were to speak up against this unfair treatment, will she be accused of sex discrimination or sex-based harassment? This last question is directly pertinent to the policy changes we will be discussing. This has direct impact on everyone's First Amendment rights. So before people come to the podium to speak, please consider your own children and how it will impact 51% of our population. And for my fellow board members, I would ask that you look in your heart and vote for what is right and not what is expedient. These rule changes change back and forth depending on who's in charge, but the truth endures. I don't feel that we are compelled to make these changes before August 1st deadline because the litigations are still evolving. We need to focus on our primary responsibility, which is to educate the young people of Wake County. Thank you.
All right, and our next speaker will be, now y'all, I talked to you about disruptions, right? Everything was very polite, but we just have to limit the amount that, okay? Next, we'll go to Mr. Hershey to conclude our board comment.
Thank you, Chair Haggerty. I want to thank you for your comments earlier. The only disagreement I would have is when you say we as Americans, and I think it's we as human beings should treat each other better. I'm going to save some of the Title IX comments for when we speak later, but you know, when we are, and I'm not going to divulge what is said in closed session, but when we are given answers in closed session and then we come out here and say other things, I don't think that's being, I think there's a little bit of being disingenuous in some of the comments because we have received answers. I will wait to make other comments about that later. I will challenge, though, as we talk about diverse, the Title IX work, and we think about when we passed policy related to the Parents' Bill of Rights, and we had a lot of people here who are going to speak passionately, and I listen all the time, who said we had to pass that. It is state law. We don't have a choice. This is what we must do. We're obligated as a school board. And now we are sitting here facing a federal regulation that has a date, August 1st, just as the Parents' Bill of Rights had the date of, I think it was moved a couple of times, but we complied and got it done. And there were some people who said we shouldn't do it, but as a board, that was our responsibility to comply. And now we're going to switch roles, and some people are going to come in here and say, you don't need to comply. It's a federal, it's something federal, we don't agree with it, so don't comply with it. And so my challenge to the speakers respectfully is to, and I know you're going to get your comments in a second, or send me an email on it. Why did we have to follow state law and comply by a certain deadline? And then now why do you turn around and say we shouldn't follow a federal guidance that we have been given when we can be fined up to the full amount of our, the federal dollars we get, which was well over $100 million. So I'm just wondering, do we only as a board pass things that we like, regardless of what the state and federal law says, and we just, hey, I don't care what the state says, we're just going to do whatever we like in the moment, or depending on what administration is at the federal level, because we have an election coming up and there could be changes, and this board, I believe its history as to whatever the Title IX changes have been, they have adopted that into policy because that is the role of the school board and the job of the school board, regardless of our own personal feelings. So I encourage, and I look forward to, hearing some comments on that. I also want to acknowledge, we have some speakers here that are going to speak about cell phone policy, and I am hopeful that the board will take up and have a robust conversation about what we may do. One of Ms. Caulfield's comments that I agreed with was talking about consistency throughout the district. And a couple of board meetings ago, we talked about how our tardiness policies are not consistent. That was brought to our attention. And so we have a cell phone policy where you can have one thing at one school, something else at another school, and it's time for us to address that. I appreciate and I encourage staff to look at what Granville County has done. I think they do it in a smart way, maybe a couple of modifications, but I just want to acknowledge them being here as well. And I just, to end on a slightly lighter note, it is the last swim meet for our summer swim kids, and I just want to give a shout out actually to the parents who are out in the heat right now volunteering, and there with their kids, and it is hot, and normally I'm clerk, of course, but I had other obligations tonight, and appreciate the families being out there. Thank you, Chair Hagerty.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hershey. And so now, before we move on with our agenda, we need to approve tonight's agenda. Do we have a motion for approval of the meeting agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I heard a couple motions. I'll take Ms. Rice as a motion to approve the agenda. Vice Chair Johnson Hostler, second. All in favor of the motion to approve the agenda, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. We will move on. So the next item on the agenda is our public comment portion. So those of you, I know some of you have been out here before and have heard these remarks. You could probably recite them yourself by now. I'm looking at you, Becky. Yes. Some others, you might be hearing this for the first time. This comes from our public policy. So it's a little lengthy, but I just want to make sure everyone knows what we do in this session. So speakers commenting on tonight's agenda items will be heard first before people commenting on other topics. All other speakers will be heard in the order of sign-up. Only one person may speak at the podium. So the person speaking at the podium will be able to stand at a time. All other attendees are to remain seated while the other people are speaking. Members of the public are free to welcome comments, criticism directed at the actions, ideas, procedures of the board and individual board members. The laws and policies in North Carolina provide that issues and concerns involving individual personnel and individual student matters, however, are confidential. And so those aren't appropriate for public comment settings. We have other ways that those can be addressed, directly working with staff so as not to reveal confidential information either involving your student or another. Now, concerns, that just basically re-says what I just said. In the interest of maintaining a civility and decorum, we do encourage you to address your comments to us at the board. And we do, have to say this: you must refrain from personal attacks and insults directed at the board, individual board members, staff, and members of the general public. You may hear things you agree with, you may hear things you disagree with, but please remember you're at the board meeting and direct your comments up here and not toward fellow speakers. Any materials you've brought that you wish to share with the board, they could be handed to our board attorney, Mr. Rod Malone, here at the end of the table, either before or after your comments. That doesn't take up any of your time. During public comment, you may speak up to 3 minutes. You'll note up here that we have microphones. They are adjustable. When you see the green light at the podium, your time has begun. It will not begin until you begin speaking. The time will count down, so when you see a yellow light and you'll hear an audible tone, the first one you hear will let you know there are 30 seconds remaining in your time, and so it's time to start wrapping up. Now, when the light turns red and you hear the tone a second time, your time has expired. I know that sometimes it's awkward, you might be mid-sentence, but we do have to enforce the time limit to give everyone who's come out to speak a fair opportunity to speak. So, and again, you can always speak for less time, but that's how the time limit works. So, at this time, I will go to our list of speakers. By our practice, what we do is we give our students the first priority to speak. Our first student speaker tonight is Miranda Waddell. Mr. Hershey, you have a question or comment?
Are we going to go all the way through all public comments first? Because we have some people waiting. I just want to make sure they are aware.
Okay, so good point, Mr. Hershey. So by practice, if in our policy, if we have public comments that go past half an hour, we can then take the rest of the comments and put them at the end of the agenda so that the items on the agenda that maybe people came out to hear can be heard and voted on first, and then we'll return to the agenda for the remainder of the public comments. I may not go 30 minutes, I might go an hour. We'll see how we pace it, and we'll try to get through as many as we can, but if it does get on beyond an hour, we will move those speakers toward the end of the agenda. All right, thank you for bringing that up, especially for people who might be here the first time. All right. So now, returning to our speaker list, the first speaker we have is student Miranda Waddell. Is Miranda here? Yes, but we will put you, are you speaking on agenda or off agenda? All right, I'll move you to that space on the thing. Thank you for letting me know. All right. So then our second student is Rowan Bilodeau. If Rowan is here?
Good evening, board members. My name is Rowan, and my pronouns are they, them, in case anyone was curious. My speech today will touch on some heavy topics, so I'd like to give everybody a trigger warning before I start. I want to speak to you about the changes to Title IX as a transgender student in your schools. Throughout my tenure in school as an out transgender person from 6th grade to present, I've experienced my fair share of discrimination. My 6th grade teacher outed me to my parents when I wasn't ready. My 7th grade teacher, or not my 7th grade teacher, in 7th grade, someone called me a series of slurs starting with T, F, and B, and I was the only one who faced punishment when I explained to my peer that I did not accept his apology. I was alienated and pushed to leave the school, so I was online for 8th grade. I was in Pittsburgh for freshman year, and it wasn't too bad. Then we moved here, and I did sophomore year at Willow Spring. And I hate to say it, but my time there has been hell. The second I walk through the door every morning, I get dirty looks or offensive comments or people trying to trip me. Whenever my bladder tells me it's time to go, I'm terrified because I have no safe option. A few years ago, I was raped in a bathroom. And it wasn't the scary scapegoated trans woman everyone pretends to be afraid of. It was the scary real man that we should be afraid of and address instead of fabricating a million other issues, which we love to do. Using the bathroom shouldn't be a panic attack for me, but it is. Walking in the hallway or going through the lunch line or sitting in class. Those shouldn't cause emotional stress, but they do. I exist in constant terror in a place where I should feel safe, and I don't even feel protected. A few weeks before the last day of school, I was walking through the lunch line with my friend when someone came up from behind me and hit me. Somebody I didn't know touched me without my permission in an attempt to inflict emotional or physical distress, which is assault. The school receptionist refused to let me see the SRO. One admin suggested that the guy just had a crush on me. Another admin told me that I was sensitive and kept me in her office to tell me that I exaggerated and would not let me leave until I agreed with her. I do not trust admin at my school with my safety anymore. I honestly don't trust anyone because it seems like everyone whose job it is to protect me instead has it out for me and people like me. All of this happened with Title IX, so maybe the changes will do a better job of preventing it in the future. Because let me tell you, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of having a target on my back just because I exist. I'm sick of feeling like me living is such a problem, and I am so sick of feeling like the only way to make it stop is to kill myself. My schools have failed me, my country has failed me, and I'm honestly just angry. 1.8 million LGBT youth in the U.S. consider suicide every year, and there is at least one attempt every 45 seconds. That number is only going to increase if this hateful ignorance continues. And as I said to our state legislature moments before they stole my rights from me, I am tired of seeing my brothers and sisters die because they are being denied their rights. Now I know that adapting to the Title IX modifications isn't going to fix these complex problems, but it's a step in the right direction. So please do it. Please show us that you care about me and about a huge demographic of your school's population. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, you all are going to love this news. I have just been informed that we are having some functional issues with our timer. We're going to take a minute to make sure that it is working properly.
So last time it just needed to be replugged, so we're going to, everybody cross their fingers. Hang on.
We don't want to deny anybody any time, but we also know we can't rely on the honor system.
Melissa, how do we test it? It's not working. Grab another one. No. Okay, got it. Is it on?
I'm not seeing anything up here.
The power cord is plugged in.
Yeah, I'd really like to avoid it if I can.
Melissa, it's working? Yeah.
I did. All right. All right, if we are ready, then that was our last student speaker. And so what we'll do is we'll go to our on-agenda speakers. And since we had Miranda on the list first, just under the wrong title, we'll call her up first. So first up will be Miranda Waddell, speaking on agenda on Policy 1710, and Miranda will be followed by Emily James. And would you mind pronouncing your last name for me?
Miranda Waddell.
Waddell. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I apologize for any butchering I might have done.
Thank you. I am requesting that the sexual harassment not be changed in the policy prohibition against harassment and discrimination for bullying. My name is Miranda Waddell. I am a believer in Christ, a mom, and a parent of a student that faces these policy topics in school. I am working to understand the changes that are going on in the policy as it relates to our world today. I understand that the revisions are being made to redefine sexual harassment to sexual discrimination and sex-based harassment. We have protected classes for a reason. We perceive they need protection. Don't we all? My concern is this policy and its changes. Discrimination and bullying are not allowed and are already included in the policy. Removing sexual harassment to replace sex-based harassment is redundant, as the policy states gender harassment to include conduct that is not as of a sexual nature. My concerns revolve around the age appropriateness of this global policy as it relates to all government-funded schools and programs. It's my understanding that Title IX protections span elementary schools through college universities. While I admire the system's protection, I question the affirmation of inclusive policies across the board. Parents' rights should not be left out of the guidelines. A child who is under the age of consent, which is 16 in North Carolina, is asked how they identify to pick a room where they can, for the type of dorm that they would like to sleep in for a government-funded program, all in the name of Title IX. That child cannot smoke, drink, or vote legally. However, they can choose if they want to sleep with the same sex they identify with while being biologically the opposite sex. That's called the assigned sex at birth. Why? Because the physical attributes are the determining factor for sex in all but an estimated 1.7% of our population. So, should children and adults alike be able to choose their respective identity for public bathrooms, locker rooms, and sleeping arrangements without discrimination or harassment? In a perfect world, however, it is not a perfect world. We are humans, and almost 100% of the time, humans will disappoint. Generally speaking, public bathrooms were segregated when women entered the workforce, and the policies were made to address safety and privacy concerns. Should we be concerned when a trans woman uses a woman's bathroom or vice versa, a trans man uses a man's bathroom? Transgender people are not to be feared. The opposite sex is not to be feared. Hatred and lack of compassion is the problem. It's a human problem. Everyone wants to be loved and accepted. If we are moving forward in a world that is non-binary, then the non-binary bathrooms will allow the community of people that want rights to be with like-minded people, hopefully not facing harassment and for their protected class, and that is already in the definitions. Don't change the definition. I'd also like to address the other reason for segregated bathrooms, which is privacy. When I asked my child about their concern for the bathrooms, I remember it was just like mine, for privacy, the cracks and things like that, and the doors, when you walk past stalls, you can see who is on the toilet. So we need to do a better job of protecting privacy, and this should be of utmost concern, especially if we are going to mix sexes because of genders.
All right.
Everyone
that's
wants
time.
protection.
Thank you very much, Ms. Waddell.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Emily James, and Emily will be followed by Ross Elliam. Good evening, Ms. James.
Good evening. All right. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Emily James, and I have 2 children currently enrolled in the Wake County Public School System. I'm here to speak about the Title IX policy changes being discussed. Because the portion of the changes regarding discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity seem to be causing people the most angst, I would like to address those changes by sharing 2 stories with you. The first story is about Jane Doe, who you may have read about in a recent statement put out by the Wake County GOP, and you just heard Ms. Caulfield reference earlier. The statement says, from the GOP, that the existing Title IX policy will, quote, allow boys in girls' locker and bathrooms, like the boy who was trans in Loudoun County, Virginia, and raped that young girl. This statement contains inaccurate information and has no connection to the policy changes being discussed. In June 2021, Jane Doe was a high school student in Virginia who was sexually assaulted in her school's bathroom. The story made national headlines in part because the victim's father told the Washington Post that his daughter's assault happened because of, quote, radical gender policies, and that the student who attacked her was gender fluid. Jane Doe publicly stated that this narrative is false. She told the New York Times that while her attacker was wearing a skirt, he was not, quote, identifying as transgender and going into the girls' bathroom under the guise of that. This is an important story because while what happened to Jane Doe is awful and unforgivable, these current policy changes to Title IX would not have prevented the attack on Jane Doe. Since its inception, Title IX has protected students from sex-based discrimination. The new regulations expand the definition to include discrimination based on sexual orientation. This means Title IX affirms the rights of the LGBTQ students to come to school as themselves. So while these changes would not have protected Jane Doe, there are students they would protect, like Next Benedict. Next was a non-binary 16-year-old from Oklahoma who had been the target of bullying at school because of their identity. Earlier this year, Next got into a physical altercation at school that left them unconscious. In an interview with police, Next said they had never reported the bullying at school, even though it had been going on for over a year, because they did not think anyone would care. The day after the bathroom attack, Next Benedict was found unresponsive and later died that day. Their death was ruled a suicide. Next did not believe they had a way to get help or that anybody would hold their bullies accountable. Under the policy changes, schools are obligated to protect students like Next. Next Benedict should have been able to seek help. Changes to these regulations are crucial steps in ensuring the safety and dignity and equality of all students, and I hope that you will all do your job by doing the right thing and implementing these changes swiftly.
Thank you, Ms. James. Our next speaker is Ross Elliam, and then Ross will be followed by Jacob Arthur, if Jake's here. Oh, there he is. All right.
Hey, how are y'all doing?
Good evening.
As a parent of Wake County school students, I'm here to be an advocate and lend my voice of support for the updated Title IX guidelines. The changes aim to expand protections to ensure that all students, regardless of their gender identity or sexual orientation, can learn, grow, and succeed in an environment free from harassment and discrimination. Education is a right, and fear out of ignorance or misinformation has no place in the pursuit of this right. As Ms. Caulfield mentioned earlier, there are some discussions about the incident in Virginia. Just to re-examine that case, the perpetrator, as the previous commenter made, was not trans. The assault did not occur in a bathroom, and so claims like these and many others are not only false and created to incite fear, but are used to spread misinformation about trans people. Not only that, but the assault occurred months before any trans inclusionary measures were put into place, meaning they had no influence on this horrible incident. In fact, a Harvard study found that transgender and non-binary students aged 13 to 17 are more likely to be sexually assaulted than their cisgender peers. Providing them access to bathrooms or locker rooms that are consistent with their gender identity actually reduces that risk by 10%. There's absolutely zero evidence that allowing these children access to bathroom matching their gender identity causes any security risk for other students. In fact, a rigorous test study from the UCLA School of Law found that there was absolutely no correlation between non-discrimination laws and public accommodations and reports of crime in public restrooms or other gender-segregated facilities. These children do not want to be activists. They just want to be normal kids. They want to go to school, learn in the classroom, make friends, and come home safely to their parents. Anyone opposing this measure is only contributing to the turmoil and causing greater damage to our children, politicizing something that should be common sense. And to go further, what's not included in these guidelines? There's no explicit language calling out sports inclusion. But if there were, it was expanded to include that. I would argue that that is a great thing. The vast majority of middle and high school students won't ever play sports at a competitive level after. We should be supporting and advocating all students to participate and foster a sense of self through sports. Critics often cite competitive fairness as a reason for exclusion, but we must recognize that athleticism varies greatly among all athletes. Sports are not just about winning. They are about participation and personal bests. Policies can be crafted that both respect the integrity of women's sports and include trans athletes, ensuring everyone competes on a level playing field. In fact, if we objectively look at the data, there isn't even an advantage to be found in competitive sports by trans athletes. Sport is a universal language that speaks to the pursuit of excellence, teamwork, and personal growth. It teaches discipline, resilience, and the joy of striving towards a goal. These lessons are invaluable to every student, and trans girls are no exception. They deserve the same opportunities to learn, to compete, and to excel. To exclude trans girls from participating in school sports is to deny them more than just the thrill of competition or the health benefits of physical activity. It's to deny them the camaraderie and sense of belonging that comes with being part of a team.
Thank you.
I think that's my time.
Thank you, Mr. Elling. Our next speaker is Jacob Arthur, and Jacob will be followed by Becky Lou Hobbs. Good evening.
Evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jacob Arthur. I'm with the NC Values Coalition. I'm also a Wake County Public School parent. I have a rising 10th grader, a rising 8th grader, a rising 5th grader, and a 5-year-old who is going to be in kindergarten and is super excited. Quickly, I will answer Mr. Hershey's question. He mentioned the fact that he doesn't know why we would not enforce Biden's Title IX regulations and enforce the Parents' Bill of Rights. That's because the Parents' Bill of Rights was a law passed by the General Assembly. Title IX was a law passed by Congress. Biden's interpretation is merely that. It's an interpretation of his regulation. This policy would require public schools to allow biological males who identify as females into showers, into locker rooms, into bathrooms with females. It would require public schools and universities to allow biological males to identify as girls to compete in girls' sports. It would violate the privacy rights of girls and women in locker rooms. It would have their freedom of speech violated. That would not only apply to females, apply to males as well. I will read from Judge Broom's order recently in a Kansas case that you have likely been informed about. Judge Broom said the Department of Education's reinterpretation of Title IX to place gender identity on equal footing with, or in some instances arguably stronger footing than biological sex, would subvert Congress's goals of protecting biological women in education. The final rule would, among other things, require schools to subordinate the fears, concerns, and privacy interests of biological women to the desires of transgender biological men in shower, dress, and same restroom facilities with their female peers. I would also include, as Ms. Caulfield said, it would allow males to be roomed with females on overnight field trips, which has happened in North Carolina. This is a reckless policy. It is currently under injunction, and it will affect Wake County. I have seen the list of schools that was provided to the federal judge, and while I am aware that the list that was put out only included Ligon Middle School, that is an incomplete list. The Attorney General of Kansas does not even have the complete list at this time. Let me just give you a brief summary of, well, there's a lot going on here. I'm happy to talk to anybody who would like to know exactly what this rule will change. But what I'll end with is this. First Amendment rights will be violated for anyone who speaks out against transgender policies. Parents' rights will be diminished. Employees will become spies to enforce compliance. And employees will be subject to discipline for not reporting possible discrimination, harassment, or bullying. Your daughters will be subjected to males in bathrooms, and your sons could be subjected to anonymous.
I'm sorry, that is your time. Thank you. All right. Our next speaker, I believe I said was Becky Lou Hobbs, and Ms. Lou Hobbs will be followed by Janet Peterson.
Well, cheers to a new school year. I'm Becky Lou Hobbs, longtime Wake County resident, mom to 3 amazing kids, and chapter chair of Moms for Liberty in Wake County. And I'm here tonight to discuss the Title IX changes and some policies on the agenda tonight and the recent federal court ruling that actually affects all 50 states. So first, what does Title IX actually say? No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. But this past spring, Biden's Department of Education issued sweeping changes to Title IX, eviscerating equality, free speech, and due process. On tonight's agenda are 2 policies regarding sex discrimination and harassment that attempt to implement these changes. Lawsuits have been filed, as you know, and several injunctions have been issued. On July 2nd, the U.S. District Court issued another injunction against Biden's DOE Title IX changes for 4 more states, plus any school attended by children of Moms for Liberty members. Because of this injunction, Wake County Schools is prohibited from implementing Biden's Department of Education changes. I furnished you a link to the ruling, but here are just a few excerpts. The purpose of Title IX was to protect biological women from discrimination in education. The DOE's reinterpretation of Title IX to place gender identity on equal footing with, or in some instances arguably stronger footing than, biological sex would subvert Congress's goal of protecting biological women in education. The DOE simply lacks authority to expand sex to mean gender identity, and it violates the First Amendment. So in summary, the court ruled that Title IX was meant to protect biological women from discrimination and found that Biden's rewrite was contrary to law, exceeded their statutory authority, violated the First Amendment, and is impermissibly vague and overly broad. So if you decide to implement the changes tonight and proceed with these policies, Wake County Schools will be in violation of a U.S. District Court order, injunction, and risk serious legal repercussions. I promise you we've already been in discussion with National about this, and it will be pursued. I also want to thank Ms. Caulfield and Dr. Wing for comments regarding Title IX, and please protect our girls. That's all we're asking. We are not asking to discriminate against anybody. We want our girls to have safe places. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker tonight, excuse me, our next speaker is Janet Peterson, who will be followed by Kathleen Robles. Welcome back, Ms. Peterson.
Thank you. Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 is a federal civil rights law prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs and activities. As has been said, the Department of Education has used rulemaking power to convert a law designed to equalize opportunities for both sexes into something much broader by expanding the reach of the rule to include gender identity. Have you heard of the song "Smoking in the Boys' Room"? Well, by allowing students to choose the restrooms and the lockers according to their preferences, smoking in the bathroom will be the least of your worries. There have already been multiple examples of vulnerable girls being sexually assaulted in bathrooms, locker rooms, and showers in the news over the last several years. The proposed policy puts responsibility on already stretched school personnel. A better solution is to provide those single-serve bathrooms and the changing spaces for students to ensure their sexual identity. Okay? Schools have to be safe spaces. Staff and student enforced codes of conduct would ensure it. But where is the line between exercising your religious beliefs and being interpreted as bullying or creating a hostile environment? As we see an increase in people from diverse cultures and religions, there should be no expectations that either students or staff do anything that would go against their religious beliefs. Where do pronouns fit in your policy? By requiring staff or students to use someone's preferred pronouns, are you creating a hostile environment? Tattletale, tattletale, hang your britches on a nail. The creation of this tattletale coordinator, Title IX coordinator, is problematic. So far, you've talked about proposed oral or written allegations of misconduct. Well, I'm sorry, oral is not sufficient. It should be written. Written statements should be mandatory. Accused individuals should have access to the document and be able to respond. I'm not sure why we need a coordinator. What happened to meeting with the counselor and letting the counselor follow through with formal or informal complaints? With these proposed policy changes, you're creating a scary situation for students and staff. The creation of a tattle system is going to be a nightmare for anyone considering employment in the school system or a new student looking to make friends. I'll close with this thought. Why not wait? Put any action on Title IX policy on hold. You've done a good job so far protecting students. Don't be hasty and enact policies that will actually endanger or harm students or that precious staff too. Thank you.
Thank you. Taking a moment of personal privilege, I do have to say this is the first time in 5 years that I've heard Motley Crue quoted at a board meeting. So we'll move on to Kathleen Robles, followed by Miguel Figueres. Is Kathleen here? There she is. Welcome, Kathleen.
Hi, welcome. First, I just want to thank you guys so much for all the work that you do. My name is Kat Robles. I'm the mother of 2 children in Wake County Public Schools. I'm the Advocacy and DEI Chair for my children's elementary school, and I'm also a civil rights lawyer. I'm here today to discuss what the changes being discussed are and what they aren't, and why they are in keeping with the original intent behind Title IX. Title IX was passed in 1972 to prohibit sex-based discrimination at educational institutions that receive federal funding. It was a landmark legislation that was greatly needed because while the Civil Rights Act of 1964 did prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex in employment, it didn't grant any protections in the realm of education. Laws aren't meant to be static. They require continual interpretation as our world evolves to ensure they fulfill their original purpose. In this instance, the goal of Title IX is to ensure equity for students facing harassment and exclusion based on sex. Students who are marginalized, excluded, and harassed in our schools every day and are in need of legal protections. That's why the federal government made explicit in the 1990s, 20 years after the passage of Title IX, that this prohibition on sex discrimination also includes a prohibition on sexual harassment. Laws aren't meant to be static. Sexual harassment also impairs equal educational access. That's also why the Department of Education issued a notice of interpretation in 2021, making it clear that Title IX applies equally to discrimination based upon gender identity and sexual orientation. Miguel Cardona, the U.S. Secretary of Education, stated that all students, including LGBTQ+ students, deserve the opportunity to learn and thrive in schools that are free from discrimination. This rule we are discussing today is entirely separate from another rule being proposed by the U.S. Department of Education relating to the participation of transgender students in sports. I just think we've had a lot of misinformation here about what the laws are and what's actually being considered, so I just want to be clear that that is a completely different proposal. Although I do want to note that the U.S. Supreme Court did rule in 2020 in the Bostock case that in the context of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, discrimination on the basis of sex must also include discrimination against individuals based upon their sexual orientation and gender identity. And that includes individuals who are transgender. The U.S. Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, said, quote, "It is impossible to discriminate against a person for being homosexual or transgender without discriminating against that individual based on sex," end quote. Now, throughout history, whenever civil rights have been extended to marginalized groups, the oppressors will show up, as they have tonight, warning of all the evils that might come if we dare to codify equity into our laws. People protested against Title IX when it was passed in 1972. They were scared of losing their power and their privilege, and that's a strong motivator. But that fear shouldn't rule the day here. None of us can be free until we are all free.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker, Miguel Figueres, and Miguel will be followed, Miguel will be followed by Jonathan Clayton. Thank you.
Whew. Hi, everybody. First, I want to thank you for having interpreters today, because we're here to serve all communities, right? So I want to thank you for that. My name is Mike Figueres. My pronouns are he, him, his, el. And in the Bible, God says, "Let us make man in our image," so God used pronouns as well. And I'm a parent organizer for Education Justice Alliance. I have some of my parents here. And I'm a parent of 4 children who have all gone through public school systems. My wife and myself also are graduates of public schools. And tonight I want to talk about the discrimination policy that everyone's so passionate about, apparently. Having worked as a youth pastor, a youth organizer, a dean of students at an alternative school in Miami, Florida, I realized just how special and important school interactions are for kids, how it can affect a growing young adult and shape them. School can provide support for a child who doesn't feel supported. It can provide structure when it's lacking in their personal life and or in their community. It's a place of acceptance and an environment for creativity and learning. A place where the sky is the limit and you can dream about goals and all ambitions. But the school experience can be a bad one too, as we heard earlier from a student. And when your uniqueness is attacked because of ignorance, because of fear, you could be going to school not feeling safe. You could be going to school and losing who you are and your creativity and not wanting to be a part of the school. There's no place for bullying, discrimination, and harassment anywhere, much less in school. Though some spaces are out of our control, right? That's going to happen. But in school, this policy can change that for our youth, for our students. They can be monitored, right? Now they can be monitored and put down all the ugly treatment and try to eliminate that ugliness, right? Well, I applaud your policy. EJA applauds your policy. Our parent leaders applaud your policy as well. And we'll be holding you accountable for ensuring that every student, regardless of race, ethnicity, sex, gender, identity, sexual orientation, religion, age, or any disability, receive a sound, equitable education and feel safe. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker is Jonathan Clayton, and Jonathan will be followed by Susan Buck. Good evening.
Good evening. Board members and fellow citizens, thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. I rise to share my honest concerns about the Biden administration's proposed changes to Title IX that you, as a school board, are considering adopting. Title IX was signed into law by President Richard Nixon on June 23, 1972, to ensure the safety and security of gender-specific private spaces and celebrate equal opportunities for women and girls in public education settings. This rewrite of Title IX is a tragic and fundamentally despicable change to this landmark legislation, as it pretends that biology does not exist and that reality can be bent in any direction that one pleases. This is simply false. It is a biological fact that there are only two genders, male and female, and that your gender is determined at your conception. It is also a biological fact that your gender, also known as your sex, cannot be changed, but is an immutable part of who you are. We must teach our children to accept, live in, and champion this reality and truth because it is for their good that it exists. I am also deeply concerned about the safety of students in our schools who will be put at extreme risk by this rewrite of Title IX. If it is accepted by the school board, as boys and girls need separate private spaces, including locker rooms, changing facilities, shower rooms, and bathrooms. This is not just because it aligns with the biological reality that humanity lives in, but also because these separate private spaces keep both boys and girls safe. In 2021, as you have already heard, in Loudoun County, Virginia, our neighboring state, a female student was sexually assaulted in the bathroom of her high school by a male student wearing a skirt. This is a tragedy that is entirely preventable by saying no to this nonsensical and dangerous policy. It is dangerous because it claims that gender is based on identity. This is not only completely delusional, but also exactly the kind of policy that leads to sexual assault in the first place. We can prevent this senseless harm to our children by declaring today that separate private spaces will remain gender-specific, as they always have in the Wake County Public School system. To conclude tonight, I urge you to decline to adopt this rewrite of Title IX. Let tonight go down in history as the night when you reaffirmed, as one school board, the reality that there are only two genders, male and female, and that to continue to foster equal opportunities and a safe learning environment for both boys and girls, you said no to this disastrous policy. Choose our children over a policy that puts them in harm's way. Thank you, God bless you, and may God bless the Wake County Public School System.
Thank you. Our next speaker tonight is Susan Book, and Susan will be followed by Margaret Bilodeau. Good evening, Ms. Book.
Before I get started, to the meat of the matter, happy Disability Pride Month. Inclusivity matters. Just so you know, I spent the better half of a Friday trying to complete a form for special education transportation reimbursement. It required printing, scanning, taking pictures of documents. It was cumbersome, and I have to say, at one point I said it wasn't worth the trouble. We can do better when it comes to inclusivity and accessibility, not only to our students, but to our parents as well. But I'm here today because I truly believe inclusivity matters to all of our students. I wish it was universal, and we could all agree no one deserves to be bullied at school. Every child should feel safe in their school, including our trans kids. Their humanity should never be up for debate, and I'm afraid that's what we're doing today. Reading about the experiences and meeting trans kids in our community has taught me that all people matter. Maybe if everyone read more and banned less, we'd all gain a greater understanding of everyone's experiences. Granting protections for trans kids doesn't take away protections from everybody else. It doesn't permit illegal behavior or shield those who commit crimes from prosecution. Instead, anti-bullying is a statement of love and compassion, an acknowledgement of all students' humanities and rights as students. Again, no one is talking about giving more rights to a group, but simply making sure our policies are inclusive to all students. Let's not demonize children, ever. Trans teens, from what I've learned, just want to learn without trauma. And bullies, they just want to be without bullies. My child isn't transgender, but he's a rising 9th grader. And if you ask him, his biggest worry is bullying. Letting him know that there are policies that protect him and his peers, and that teachers and staff can be relied on to carry out those policies, goes a long way in alleviating fears. All children should feel safe at school, no matter who they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Margaret Bilodeau, followed by Kim. I'm not sure it's Kim Maney or Kim Manny. All right, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Margaret Bilodeau, and I'm a proud parent of 2 children in the district. Tonight, I'm here in order to advocate for consent agenda item 7A, policy revisions made in order to comply with Title IX. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'd like to applaud the use of verifiable data in crafting this policy. It's crucial that we base our decisions on factual information rather than capitulating to the influence of loud but unrepresentative groups, which unfairly target certain children and hinders genuine efforts in preventing sexual assault and harassment. We must address the real perpetrators of sexual assault. By not doing so, we allow them to remain free to assault again, as statistical data shows. The issue of sexual assault affects our communities and schools, and it's essential that we tackle it head on. The distraction and subterfuge surrounding sexual assault only serve to perpetuate and allow it to continue. Trans individuals are more likely to be assaulted in a bathroom. The perpetrator in Loudoun County does not and did not identify as trans. False information should not inform policy. If we don't address the root of the problem, such as the vulnerability that perpetrators exploit, we cannot effectively prevent sexual assault. Furthermore, the othering of children who are different only serves to make schools and society more dangerous for LGBTQIA+ and trans children. I applaud the school board for standing with policies that will have a positive impact on all students and prevent arbitrary exclusion. Moreover, we must dispel the notion that sex assigned at birth dictates athletic ability. As a teenager, this notion left me feeling excluded. However, when given the chance to participate, I did very well in my chosen sports. In fact, I won a state Taekwondo sparring title by fighting and beating a male in my weight class, despite having 2 sprained ankles. We don't hear people shouting as loud as they possibly can to defend transgender males and demanding that they be protected in order to participate in sports. No, we just hear targeting of trans females, and specifically one player in the entire state, which our General Assembly wasted thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars discriminating against one student. Anyone who has played volleyball knows at some point you'll take a header. I take umbrage to the notion that males are harder hitters than female. The idea that men are inherently superior to women is fundamentally contrary to gender equality. We should be finding ways to include more students in athletics, not finding ways to exclude some children. Trans male players who excelled in their sport prior to coming out are often pushed out due to social maltreatment and scapegoating, which leads to sexual harassment. Sexual harassment and assault disproportionately affect the LGBTQIA community, especially the trans community. We must ensure that no student is targeted or excluded based on their gender identity, which is bullying. I urge each of you to vote yes to replace the current prohibition against discrimination. And I'm going to remind you that this has already been clarified in a Dear Colleague letter that nobody's been following. So they just had to actually make it an executive order because nobody was following the Dear Colleague letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kim Maney, and Kim will be followed by Loretta Humphrey. Hey, sorry I didn't recognize your name, but I recognize the face.
No, sorry, and I didn't get an email, so I kind of made up my little statement. I didn't have it. Yeah. Anyway, so thank you guys so much for your service and allowing the public to speak. I want to talk, as everyone has this evening, about the Title IX policy change and my support for that. I was at a consignment sale this weekend where there were 50 copies of a well-known children's book, which I will paraphrase as Everyone Goes to the Bathroom. I wondered if purchasing and passing out that book here might help us to get our mind out of the toilet and instead focus on one of the greatest benefits of public education, which is the exposure to those who are different from you, to embrace them and spend time with them and make what happens to them matter to you. Children bully because they don't understand, because they've never seen anyone who was like that before. So having protections for those students, like what is proposed in the changes that we see, is so important. It is the purpose of public education. And challenging individuals who seek to keep us behind, who seek to, couched in religious terms, keep us from moving forward, to move us away from segregation in any form, is important. So I wholly support these changes, and thank you so much for time to speak.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Loretta Humphrey, and Loretta is followed by Natalie Liu.
Hi, my comments are in regards to Title IX. It doesn't matter to me what another human being identifies as. However, for an example, if I had a friend that identified as a unicorn, I do not believe that friend should be allowed to run in the Kentucky Derby. Gosh, I got lost here. Biological men, for all obvious reasons, should not be involved in female sports. South Carolina's coach, Dawn Staley, has her team practice with men's intramural teams. She is fully aware that men are bigger, stronger, and faster than biological women. You can see the statement being made here. No biological woman will ever become an NFL quarterback, a major league pitcher, or an NBA point guard. Men don't want someone who is not a biological man to define what masculinity is. I got lost. In regards to Title IX, savages who dogfight do not put a poodle in the ring with pit bulls. Do those savages have more decency than those who want to put biological males in women's sports? Because we would be putting our young women in harm's way to have them. It would most likely cause serious injuries and harm to biological women, and completely put an end to the possibility of a scholarship, which is wrong on so many levels. Biological women have fought too hard to get where they are today. I believe that one day soon in America and in the social media, and most importantly this vote tonight, that we will free ourselves from woke ideology and return to recognizing reality and speaking honestly. Only when that happens will sports return to serving as an important source of unity rather than division in our culture. Keep in mind, you cannot amplify those who want to be silent. Silent people simply ask for vouchers to go to charter schools or homeschool, so not to be involved in the Wake County nonsense. In closing, I ask you, Who in this room is a savage? Are you? Do you want to put a poodle in a pit bull fight? That's the question. Oh, in regards to you, the federal money that we're receiving for public education, that really needs to be investigated, sir, because,
But thank you. All right, our next speaker is Natalie Liu, and Natalie will be followed by Maureen McBride. All right, good evening.
Don't worry, I'm winging it. That was just
Okay.
something else.
No, just don't let it tip.
Yes, yeah, just in case I wanted to refer to that, so. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
There you go.
So I'm just winging this now because I've been working on the RDU Quarry fight mostly, but my name is Natalie Liu, and I am a Cary High School graduate from the early 80s. I came up of age under Title IX. That Title IX made a huge difference from one year to the next. I went on, I ran track and field. I actually went to NC State on a scholarship, and then I transferred to the University of Texas. I held a track and field record at NC State for 35 years, and I held a record at the University of Texas for 25 years. I raced Jackie Joyner Kersey, so I was pretty good. Average high school guy could beat me. There's you. Nothing different between us. We have different skin color, different religious beliefs, whatever. We're the same. You, and you. We're biologically different. One of you guys could probably beat me and take records away from me. So to the gentleman that had said something about it's just sports, it doesn't matter. No, there's some people out there, if you're working hard, you want that opportunity to compete against sports, and an average boy can beat me. Like I said, I was kind of winging it. So I am basically, I'm a document reviewer by trade, and so I reviewed what I think was your old policy and the new policy. One, you should have a red line version so it's easier to see the text change. But somebody earlier came up and said, oh, they're just adding in sexual orientation. The old policy has sexual orientation in there. I don't care, nobody cares about who you want to love or who you think you are, but there is a biological difference between men and males and females. And so what you did with the new policy, you just added some words about not bullying transgender or based on transgender or gender identity, which is all good and fine. I want to treat these people nice, but when it comes to sports, no. When it comes to coming in my bathroom, no. I was a victim of a sexual assault. I don't care if you're a boy that thinks you're a girl. I don't want you in my bathroom if you've got stuff hanging out. It's just not right. Same thing with, the sports, the locker rooms, the bathrooms. A single stall is one thing, but not in a bathroom. There should not be a biological boy in there. I mean, if they need other spaces, that's fine. But I think what we need to do is get to the heart of the matter and the definition. What is, transgender? If you define that word, a boy that thinks they're a girl is still a boy. A girl that thinks they're a boy is still a girl. And that's what it boils down to, teaching kids the truth. But no, sports needs to be it is for education, but for those that want to work hard and compete, they should have that opportunity. I was the one that, if there was a boy in there, I'd be that one person that didn't get to go to whatever competition. I was just barely there at the national level. There's other people that, like Riley Gaines, that got knocked off a podium. It's just a biological fact that you dudes are stronger than us girls.
And that is time. Thank you, Ms. Liu. So our next speaker is Maureen McBride, who will be followed by Theodore Hills. Good evening.
Read in my line of vision. Hi, everyone. Do I have to? Okay. My name is Maureen McBride from Wake Forest. In 1972, Title IX was passed to protect women's education, sports, and private spaces. Their intent was clearly defined by congressional records. In 72, women's sports and academics received just 2% of annual budgets, with 300,000 women participating nationally, and that number has increased, 40% of budgets now in a good school, and 3 million participating. That is still a gap. but certainly improvement. That improvement is now at risk. The new interpretation is very vague. It comes from a three-letter agency. It is not a law. It is a mandate. It might be connected to money, but you have the opportunity to do the right thing despite what dollars are attached to it. How will it destroy women's sports? Decreased opportunities for participation in medals and scholarships. As of March 2023, womensportspolicy.org reported that 578 victories in women's sports were achieved by men. That is in 60 sports. That is a direct insult to people who have been working their whole lives to achieve. Sports Medicine published a paper stating that during and after puberty, biological men have a 10 to 50% physical advantage over women depending on the sport. And that pesky science that everyone wants us to follow. Redefining meaning of the words like sex and gender to force societal and political engineering. Forced speech is never okay. Diminishes the role of women in education, sports, and life. It also, the language allows for a single investigator model again, which I think goes against due process for anyone who is accused of something as heinous as harassment. And that single investigator model also allows the investigator to make the decision. I don't really know how you get to be judge and jury all at once. That's not how things are supposed to work in America. Denying an accused of due process is a protected constitutional right. In closing, I implore you to ask your moms, your wives, your sisters, your daughters, and your daughters' friends if they approve of having their opportunities, values, bodily autonomy, safety, and privacy violated. I'm hopeful that you have asked those questions in light of the very important decision that I hope you put on hold until the court can sort this out. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Theodora Hills.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for this opportunity. According to the U.S. Department of Education's website, the department released its final changes to Title IX with the stated intention that, quote, no person experiences sex discrimination in federally funded education, unquote. However, several parties, both public and private, have sued to prevent the implementation of the changes, and as a result, there are temporary injunctions preventing implementation in 14 states. The Kansas Federal District Court's injunction potentially applies to all 50 states. In addition, there are at least 4 more suits pending. Clearly, I am not alone in the opinion that these changes to Title IX will not prevent sex discrimination, but will in fact harm students, and especially girls, for whom Title IX was originally designed to protect. In light of this, I think that it is prudent to wait for these cases to be resolved before implementing any changes in Wake County. However, I am asking for more than mere prudence from this board. I am asking you to refrain from implementing any of the Title IX changes at any time. Let me explain why. The altered Title IX requires that a student be allowed to participate in girls' sports based on the gender the student feels he has. Unfortunately, this does not take into account the risks of injuries to girls who are competing with boys, nor the virtual erasure of females as first-place contenders with males. According to one study, adult males have 32% more muscle mass by weight than adult females, and this is, of course, reflected in boys as they develop. Furthermore, males have heavier and denser bones and are about 4.5 inches taller than females, taking a global average of heights. The result is that men on women's teams pose a risk of serious injury to both teammates and competitors, and also take top places in competitions such as foot and swimming races. There have been high-profile incidents of girls being injured by boys as a result of Title IX-like accommodations, including one right here in North Carolina, and of girls losing to boys by wide margins that are based on sex differences, not competitive power. Creating these risks and indeed certainties in order for a boy to feel undiscriminated against when he claims he is a girl is unwarranted. Underlying this is the reality that a person's sex does not change when they make a claim counter to their biology. And Pointing out this reality when done in a sensitive manner does not constitute discrimination. If that's not bad enough, the new Title IX requires that girls' bathrooms, locker rooms, and housing be open to any boy identifying as a girl. This compromises not only girls' privacy but also their safety. It defies common sense to believe that incidents won't occur when boys are allowed into girls' bathrooms and locker rooms. In summary, I ask that this board refrain from implementing Title IX changes, and, if necessary, sue the Federal Department of Education, as other states have done, to have these irrational changes rescinded. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes our on-agenda list of speakers. I said we would go an hour, so that would take us about two-thirds of the way through our off-agenda speakers. I've heard from some of you that you want to go on, and let's go ahead and hear from everybody. If we go to our limit, that would leave two people that would have to wait till the end of the meeting. So I'd like to go ahead and press on if we're all amenable. Okay, great. All right, so ironically, I think the list is going to be one shorter. The next person on the list, I saw him here earlier, but I believe he's left. Is Terrell still here? Okay, so then that will take our first off-agenda speaker will be J. Brewer Ellerby, Jr. Welcome to the podium, Mr. Ellerby. Eberly, sorry. Yeah, please, to Mr. Malone there.
Board members, thank you. My name is Dr. Brewer Eberly. I'm a family physician here in the city, and then a McDonald Agape Fellow with the Theology, Medicine, Culture Fellowship at Duke Divinity School. Last year, I discovered an essay by 15-year-old Caleb Silverberg titled, "Why I Traded My Smartphone for an Axe." So Caleb, writing as a student, well aware of the burden his generation faces between social media, screen time, and gun violence, makes a plea to his peers to simply put the phone away while in educational settings. I'll often share this article with my young patients, pairing the voice of one of their peers with the voice of clinical practice, such as an article published last year in Pediatrics in Review, the official journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics, which explicitly connects school readiness to avoidance and reduction in screen time, or a study from London's Institute of Psychiatry, which found that average cell phone distractions manifest a 10-point fall in IQ, twice that of smoking marijuana, or a disturbing set of experiments in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, which showed that the mere presence of a cell phone decreases the quality of conversation and heightens the potential for aggression, particularly when discussing something personally meaningful. We know screen time is linked to pediatric depression, insomnia, nearsightedness, obesity, worse concentration, and worse academic performance. And I suspect this board is familiar with such stories, a few of which I've offered in a handout. They are top of mind for me these days, especially after the Surgeon General's call last month to make schools phone-free environments, echoing similar calls from the UK Department of Education, already manifest in bans at Eton College, for example, which is arguably the most elite boarding school in Britain. You know, one of the deep privileges of caring for school-aged children is I get to ask them where they find themselves coming alive. Where do they feel their hearts quickening? Where do they feel and see their minds flowing for the first time, where work and wonder are coming together? And the answers can be clues to a future life well lived and work well chosen. And it's my professional and clinical opinion, though also I think common sense and practical wisdom, that cell phones do not support such flourishing in a school setting. I understand cell phones can play a role in expression in the health of students who, for example, need to track their blood sugars. But for the vast majority of students, smartphones take more than they give. I'll close with this. My middle son came downstairs just several weeks ago, just after we'd put him to bed, and asked me if I was going to spend the evening on my computer or on my phone. So it's not lost on me the log in my own eye here. I'm a family doctor, sure, but a lot of pediatric care is parents and adults practicing what we preach. Otherwise, we will continue risking the formation of a generation who cannot learn because they cannot attend, who cannot raise their hand in wonder because they've been habituated to reach into their pockets. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nicole Stewart, and Nicole will be followed by Jocelyn Pease. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Taylor, Chair, members of the board. I'm sorry that two of our speakers tonight of our mighty but small group had to leave already. It's a long night. I know you got a long time ahead of you, too. But I also want to offer my perspective as a parent of two children in Wake County Public Schools. My name is Nicole Stewart, and my children are second-generation Wake County Public School students. They've just completed 6th and 8th grade, and frankly, I'm concerned for their and their classmates' education, health, and overall well-being. As you can guess by now, I'm concerned about how cell phones are impacting their lives. In my own children's schools, there is a policy that phones must be secured and powered off. Phones should only be used in emergencies or during lunch periods. But who is left to enforce this policy, and are children actually building incredibly important socialization skills during their break, or are they addictively playing online games and checking social media? I understand that some, if not much, of the pressure to allow children to have phones in schools is coming from parents. Parents who want to be able to text and call and track their children at any moment all day long. Parents who are afraid of not being able to reach their children in an emergency. But this parenting style doesn't allow our children to fail forward, nor learn to operate independently of us. It also doesn't keep them safe in a true emergency, an emergency where their safety is dependent on paying attention to the adult in the room. I want to be clear. No one person or entity in our community is to blame for where we are today. We collectively, as parents, teachers, administrators, and leaders, didn't know better. But now we do. Now the data is resounding, and it's our responsibility to collectively take action. Not unlike how we banned tobacco on campuses across the nation, it's time to ban phones because we've grown to realize the health risk associated with them for our children. I'm here today along with, again, sorry, Terrell Midget and Craig Erb already had to leave, and Dr. Eberly, to urge you to ban cell phones in schools. We'll plan to email you our comments. Communities across the nation, from California to Virginia and across the world, are already doing so, citing youth chronic health conditions. If you feel the need to first research the impacts locally, look no further than the pilot you've already effectively conducted. I understand there are Wake County Public Schools that have complete bans on phones, schools that have bans that aren't enforced, and others that have no rules. Collect the data from these schools and see if and how students' grades, student attention and conduct, teacher satisfaction, and more vary across the different policies. Frankly, though, I don't know that our students can wait another academic year while we analyze what we know the data will say. So I urge you to consider an outright ban on cell phones, a ban that does not require teachers to act as enforcers across Wake County schools for the coming academic year as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next speaker tonight will be Jocelyn Peace, followed by Diane Chandler.
Hello, I'm Jocelyn Peace. I'd like to talk to y'all tonight about restraint and seclusion use in Wake County Public Schools. I have heard board members and district administration say restraint and seclusion is necessary, it keeps kids safe, it's calming, and it teaches self-regulation. The data, the research, and the experts that I gave you in that paper prove it is all false. The proven effects and risks of restraints and seclusion include physical and mental trauma, worsening of behaviors, creating new behaviors, self-harm, PTSD, suicidal ideation, suicide, and death. Yes, hundreds of children in America have died from restraint and seclusion. Restraint and seclusion produce negative emotions of anger, distress, fear, shame, humiliation, dehumanization, and anxiety. There is no educational value to restraint and seclusion. Research shows it adversely affects the brain and learning. Restraint and seclusion is not therapeutic. It is not calming. Instead, it escalates behavior and further dysregulates both staff and student. Restraint and seclusion is not necessary. CPI, the company that Wake County contracts with to teach staff appropriate restraint techniques, is now partnering with the Alliance Against Restraint and Seclusion and supportable solutions to dramatically decrease restraint and end seclusion in America. Other alternative approaches have been successfully used in other districts, states, and facilities. When adults changed how they responded to children and appropriately trained staff in these districts, they were able to decrease restraints and also eliminate seclusion. Data there showed stopping seclusion resulted in a 90% decrease in the use of restraint, a 64% decrease in staff injury, a 133% increase in goal mastery, and an increase in global assessment scores, a decrease in peer aggression, defiance, and disruption by 92% after just 1 year of using these alternative approaches. They also saw decreased staff turnover, sick time, workman's compensation costs, insurance costs, and improved job satisfaction. They were all documented. All students and staff would benefit if you would stop seclusion, update Policy 4302, and change the current culture and restraint of seclusion in the county. And that paper contains all the research and articles that you need for that. So I really appreciate y'all being willing to listen to me tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Diane Chandler, and then Diane will be followed by our final speaker, Edith Jones. Good evening, Ms. Chandler.
Hi. So I am here to speak about the Parkside Middle Morrisville High School switch of location, which was supposed to be on tonight's agenda, but for whatever reason seems to have been moved. So I thank you for that, giving us more time to think about it, hear our opinions, because there are a lot of them. I may be the only one here tonight, but I know that you guys have received emails. And part of the reason why I'm the only one here tonight is because of past experience last year where our parents came to talk to you about reassignment and just felt like they were not heard. So be aware that's in the back of everybody's mind. Okay, so first of all, the timing, we want to know what happened. I literally went to it in April. A Parkside Middle student assignment planning meeting. And in April, we were still talking about Parkside Middle being right next to Parkside Elementary. The land for Morrisville High School was, if I'm correct, was sold to you by Morrisville Town for the purpose of a high school. And in talking to the council members, a couple of them over 4th of July, a few months ago, everything was going well. We were all on board. Everything was what happened? Tell me what happened, okay? My number one concern is for safety of our kids. I do not think, and nobody thinks it is okay to have high schoolers directly next to an elementary school. And not to say that high schoolers are bad, but they have more freedom. Some of them can go off campus. They may want to walk to the stores that are in our neighbor, like right next to our neighborhood. There is a road. I was there yesterday. In our bus loop, Parkside Elementary bus loop, there is a road that connects the bus loop to the new, what was supposed to be the middle school. I don't know the purpose of the road, if it's still going to be there, but it has concerns for high schoolers who are free to walk around, and so this is a concern. Also, we have a neighborhood feel for Parkside Elementary, and we adore it. We love it, and we want to continue to get neighborhood feel for Parkside Middle. It's important to keep our younger children closer to us. I don't want to be sending my middle school kids all the way across Chapel Hill Road to a commercial zone area. It makes much more sense to have a high school there. I'll be back.
All right, thank you, Ms. Chandler. All right, our final speaker tonight is Ms. Edith Jones.
How are you?
All right.
Excuse me. Okay, this is the word from the Lord for you tonight. And the word is from Luke 17:2. It would be better for him, you guys, to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around his or her neck than for him or her to cause one of these little ones to sin. And this is the millstone. This is the millstone. He didn't say what was next. He never spoke what was next. But I'm guessing if you don't repent for what you're doing, for the decisions you're making, hell is next. Hell is next. Because you know what you're doing to the children is not acceptable to God. He is not pleased with it. He is not pleased at all. The things that you're teaching the children, you're allowed to be taught to these kids. Same sex. All these things. And I admire you, ma'am, and sir, for the stand that you're making. You're teaching them same sex. You're opening them up to demonic activity. You're opening them up to darkness. And you know what? That is a recipe for failure. But I tell you what, Jesus is coming. I have been here to this board so many times, 5 or 6 times, and I've been coming in the name of the Lord, and I've been giving you the same message. God said he wants change. He wants to see change from you guys. But you know what? You never did. The same thing. Just like this young lady was saying, you never listened, you never addressed it. But you know what about the children? About the transgender and same sex and changing their identity, you never made any attempts to change it. But you know what? Jesus is coming. He's coming. And he's coming, and for you, for everyone that is not making a change, not even tried attempt to make a change, he's coming. And believe me, he is coming. He is coming. And he's coming for change. He's coming for his children. As a matter of fact, there are parents and teachers, educators all over that, you know what? They've taken their children back. We're taking the schools back. We're taking our children back, and we're going to win this fight. We will win. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That concludes our public comment period. So the next item on our approved agenda is consideration of our consent agenda. You all have had an opportunity to review the consent agenda items online. And at this time, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the consent.
We have a motion from Ms. Mahaffey and a second from Ms. Rice. All in favor of adoption of the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the items on the consent agenda have been adopted. So now we'll move to our action agenda. And the first item we have under our Chief of Schools is the Wake Young Women's and Wake Young Men's Leadership Academy University Partner Recommendation. All right, I wondered which of our dream team would be up here. Looks like Mr. Carrozza drew the short straw.
Good evening. So we're here to seek your approval of the partnership for Wake Young Men's and Wake Young Women's Leadership Academy with Shaw University, as well as approving their calendar for the 24-25 school year that aligns with Wake Tech Community College. You had a presentation earlier today during the board work session, so staff is here tonight just seeking your approval.
Great. Board members, of course, you were all in the work session. You all heard all of the information, saw the comparisons between the partners. I know we didn't have a lengthy discussion, but I know some of you wanted to save that discussion for this meeting. So do we want to start off with a motion and then go into discussion? All right, Mr. Hershey.
I move that we approve Shaw University as the new partner for the Leadership Academy and the calendar for the Leadership Academy as well.
And do we have a second?
Second.
I heard a second from Mr. Swanson. All right. Is there any discussion of the recommendation? Mr. Hershey.
Is Mr. Williams still here?
I think he's hung up right now, but he will.
Okay, so one thing that I wanted to bring up with this is just to be on the record, the passing of the bill and the new approval will still mean 2 separate academies. That's our expectation as a board going forward, and that's the expectation of staff?
Yep, that's correct.
Thank you. I just want to start, I'm going to speak for a couple minutes, I'll get moving. First, I want to thank our parents and acknowledge our parents and our students and the staff at our leadership academies for everything they've been going through over the last 8 months or so. Their input in this decision has been invaluable. I appreciate them taking the time to speak with us and to speak with me directly. I want to thank Representative Perret for taking the lead on the bill that we got through the General Assembly faster than I thought it would go. I didn't even mind the vape stuff that they added to it. I don't know the backstory there, so I won't get into it, but I thank the governor for signing that bill. I want to thank Wake Tech for stepping up and partnering with the Leadership Academies for this next year. And I want to thank all the institutions that spoke with us as potential partners to be with the Leadership Academies. I could not be more excited to have Shaw University as our partner. They are offering everything that our families, our students, and our staff were looking for. They are incredibly enthusiastic about this partnership. They're presenting opportunities for us to grow with them, particularly on the leadership side. And so I could not be more supportive. And I just want to add that if we could sometime this fall start doing tours there, I know the parents have asked to please get on campus so we can get rolling on that. And I just want to thank Mr. Williams, he's not here, and Mr. Domenico, and all the rest of our staff that worked on this tirelessly. It was a lot of work. It's not easy to put these together, but fantastic result, and I look forward to a wonderful partnership with Shaw University. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hershey. Are there other comments that board members have or any questions? Dr. Ng.
I pretty much ditto what Mr. Hershey says, but also just wanted to thank Mr. Hershey publicly for his in-depth participation with the whole conversations with all the parties, and then keeping all the rest of us involved and informed. So I really thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ng. Any further comments? I don't want to cut anybody off. I know that this has been a long process. Ms. Mahaffey?
I just want to echo the previous statements. Having students being able to go to a small college is something not everyone is able to do. So the fact that we're able to do this is amazing, and the fact that it is the first HBCU just really adds to that experience. And so I'm grateful to everyone who participated in the process, and I'm very excited to see the partnership ahead with this historic institution.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Final comments? Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler.
Yes, I guess I probably shouldn't go, because the only thing that I did want to add is, and I will echo all the sentiments that my colleagues have said. Thank you, Mr. Hershey, the countless hours that you've invested. I know that the parents across the district thank you, because several of those parents actually live in my district. And so we are very appreciative to your time that you committed to this, but also your ability to communicate back to the board exactly what those families wanted and needed. So thank you very much. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also echo the sentiment. Says it is a small university, and it also has a very rich history, which I think is also an important piece for me as someone, you all know, I've attended multiple, have 2 degrees from 2 historically black colleges and universities. And so the importance of that rich history being spread to all of our students, certainly for me, is an example of the work that we continue to strive to do in Wake County Public Schools is ensure that all students have access to all information. And this is a history that many of them would not have had. And so those of us in the HBCU community call Shaw Mother Shaw, because it indeed is the mother and foundation for students of color who were not able to go to college. And many of you know the story, but those of you who don't, I recommend Googling it. $500 was the original amount that Reverend Tupper, who also the church near Shaw is called Tupper Memorial, had as a freedman to purchase land and lease it and continue to move from there. So it speaks to there can be naysayers, but it just takes an ounce of hope and a whole lot of planning and support to do this. So thank you to all of my colleagues for your support, and certainly the yeoman's work to Mr. Williams, who is not at this table, but hopefully he will go back and listen to the recording. Oh, good, he's in the back. I know that you said you had a few gray hairs, but I think they were already there, and I appreciate greatly the amount of time that you put into it. Again, Mr. Hershey played the role for our board, but I also think it was, for me, amazing to hear the feedback from families of having both a school representative and a board member be so intimately engaged with parents. People felt heard and seen. And that's what we strive to do. And again, thank you, Mr. Domenico and Dr. Taylor, Ms. Ellis, and everyone who had to spend countless hours doing this work. And Ms. Caruso, thank you for being the person who's punting in front of us for the work that you put in as well. Thank you.
Got a lot of experience.
Thank you, Vice Chair Johnson Hostler. There were a lot of people that put in so much work, and one of them may want to say something now. Ms. Rice?
Yeah, that's just one thing. Give light, and people will find a way. Ella Baker. And that's all I want to say. There was much light given to this project. It just makes me very proud to see what Wake County can do when they band together, have strong leadership, and move things forward in a manner that's productive for all of our students.
Thank you. I was trying to tick off and make sure that we got everybody. I know we've expressed our gratitude for a lot of people that were very instrumental. I want to make sure, did we thank Principals King and Walker? Because, thank you, okay. They've been instrumental guiding the families through this process, and I know this has been a stressful situation for them. Obviously, Mr. Hershey, your advocacy on this was just invaluable, and everybody, the families involved, but just the families that you represent on the school board should be really proud of the work that you put in on this, so thank you very much. Representative Paré really did a lot of heavy lifting for us in the legislature. I don't want to overlook her contribution at all. She took on some long odds and worked really, really hard on this. And then finally, Dr. Scott Rawls and Wake Tech. We wouldn't be here to be able to make this decision to continue the program and especially land it where we've landed it if not for Dr. Rawls and Wake Tech and the board members of Wake Tech being able to step up and offer our students a transition home so they can continue their participation in the program. And they really helped to save this program, and I want to make sure they get full credit for that. All right, so at this point, we have a motion, we have a second. Are we ready for a vote? All right, all those in favor of accepting the recommendation of Shaw University as the new partner for our leadership academies, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Do a separate vote for the calendar.
Now we need to do a separate vote for the calendar. Was part of the motion?
Was, okay. Perfect.
All right, so that has been adopted and enrolled. So the new school will follow the same calendar as Wake Tech.
Excellent.
All right, thank you. All right, next on our action agenda, policies. The first policy that I have listed here is Policy 2310, Public Participation at Board Meetings, first reading. Request waiver of second reading. If we're all ready for that one, give me just a minute to pull it up. Here we go. Whoops. Ironically, it pulled up a technology item, which is not the correct item. And I'm going to blame that on technology, not user error. All right. Hold on, I just have a different order than I see here. Yeah. Well, I just want to make sure. My agenda has 1710 first. So do you have 2310? Yes. Okay. Yeah, so I have a different one, so I'm going to go off what we've got here. All right. And if you're wondering why that's important, it's because the listed person, first name listed, is Chris Haggerty, Board Chair. So during the board work session, you know, that we just had, on June 18th, the board had a discussion regarding streamlining the board meeting agenda. As we've all seen, board meeting agendas can get very long. We may have more speakers on topic and off topic, such that the length of time it takes might exceed some people's patience and endurance, and we might lose people who would otherwise be here and participating. So we had a good discussion of several options on ways to streamline those, and those are included here, if you look at your supporting documents, in amendments to 2310. Again, we have here, this would set aside, I want to make sure this is correct. The changes that we spoke about were that we would have 2 public comment sessions, one that would start prioritizing the items on the action agenda, and then the second set that would be for the off-agenda items. And you'll see combined with the next policy, these would now come in front of board member comments to allow public comment to come first on the agenda. We would also move adoption of the agenda up higher on the agenda, so we wouldn't have completed agenda items before adopting the agenda. And I will apologize to folks. I have been traveling and just got back into town. So this version of 2310 I'm reading says the board regularly sets aside 2 30-minute public comment periods, each for the regular business meeting, one prior for consideration of action. And I want to make sure that that's consistent with our discussion, because I thought we had talked about not having a limit. So I want to question the draft here. I don't believe this is accurate from what we had discussed in the board meeting, or what we had decided on in the board meeting. Okay. All right. So I believe we were going to set aside 2 public comment periods. It's just they weren't limited to 30 minutes. And then the rest of the changes, each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes unless the board by a majority vote reduces the amount of time for each speaker in order to hear more from speakers within the time allotted. Say if we had 60 speakers and we knew we wouldn't be able to get to everybody before people started leaving, we could have the vote to reduce the time, maybe from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, to allow everyone to speak. But we wouldn't have a cap on how long the people could speak. That's how I remember it, but I want to go around the table and make sure that was consistent with your memories of the discussion. Ms. Caulfield, did you have?
Well, I wasn't here for that discussion, but I just wanted to say, as far as, I'm not really exactly in favor of that, because I feel like if we're shortening the time because we have more people to talk to us, it just means that more people are coming to talk to us. They're taking that time twice a month. That's all they get, to come and speak to us for 3 minutes. And they prepared a speech to sit there because they know at 3 minutes they're going to get the gout, they're going to get cut off. So how do they sit in the audience to say, oh, well, you have more people now that want to talk to you. How do I modify my speech by an entire minute? We've all been candidates before, and you stand up a stage and they tell you whether you have 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 3 minutes to do your speech. It's really hard to do that. So I feel like we're kind of limiting their speech by doing that when they only have 2 opportunities a month to come and speak to us for only 3 minutes. So I'm not exactly in favor of that.
Ms. Rice?
Yeah, I recall these same conversations when we had this. I said, let the people speak. We're in these positions to listen to community and public. It's only twice a month. Yes, I know it might extend to longer periods of time, but to take away someone's ability to share what they have and they only have 3 minutes to do it, I think that we should be able to do that, and I'm really not in favor of decreasing people's time, but I am in favor of the 2 segments if we need to. I hate to say it like this, but we're here for a reason. Let's serve the public the way that we're supposed to.
All right, thank you. Mr. Swanson, did you have?
I did. I was just going to say I don't recall us putting a time to it either. I just thought it was two time slots that were there with no time limit, just to give the public an opportunity to give their comments before we gave ours. So that's what it is. So I am in favor of adjusting the agenda as it is presented.
All right, thank you. Dr. Ring, then Ms. Mahaffey, then Ms. Edmonds.
As I recall, I did oppose having any time period less than 3 minutes, so I think we should make an adjustment in that aspect as well.
Thank you. Ms. Mahaffey?
Again, I echo my colleagues. I think that last underlined clause in Section 1, if it was struck, that would more accurately reflect the discussion that we had at the work session. So I don't know if you need a motion and then a friendly amendment, or what the parliamentary procedure would be for doing that.
So let me hear from Ms. Edmonds, and then we'll.
Thank you. So I'm actually in favor of the way that it's written, the last sentence, unless the board by majority vote reduces the time for each speaker, because I don't read this as that would be our common practice, that each speaker is allotted for 3 minutes. I'm in favor of 3 minutes. I agree completely that that is part of our duty, is to listen to public comment, and I think 3 minutes is a stretch as is. So, because it is hard to get all of your thoughts crammed into just 3 minutes. So to me, this doesn't, I don't see this as dictating practice, common practice, but it just allows us the possibility to do that in an unusual circumstance. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, I do want to apologize. This didn't quite come out as I think we had talked about. Do people feel comfortable amending it at the table to get it back to what we had, or do you want to send it back to policy for any rediscussion or revision?
I'm okay with the table.
Table discussion? Okay. And again, like I said, just these changes have to be considered with the other changes in the parliamentary procedure part of the policy to see how it all works together. All right. So, Ms. Mahaffey, I don't know that we actually put forward a motion yet. So would you like to amend the proposal?
Sure. Chair Hagerty, I make a motion that we accept these proposed changes with the exception of the final underlined portion of the sentence in Section 1, which reads, unless the board by majority vote reduces the time for each speaker in order to hear from more speakers within the overall time allotted.
All right. Is there a second?
Getting rid of
The
the 30
Yeah.
in the first line,
Yeah.
the word 30 from the original policy.
Yes. Sorry. This would also include getting rid of the 30 minutes, or 30 minutes for public comment.
So the sentence would finish, each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes. Okay.
Yes.
Everyone comfortable with that? Mr. Malone,
Thanks,
do you
team.
have that language?
I just want to clarify, so the first line would read, the board regularly sets aside 2 public comment periods, correct?
Yeah, I believe that's.
Okay, just making sure.
Okay. All right, and do we have a second? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Yes, I second it.
Second from Mr. Swanson. All right. Ms. Evans.
I have a question. So what is the rest of it? Are we keeping public comment during each regular business meeting, one prior to the consideration of action items? And one at the end, at the conclusion of the business? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
That part's separating. For example, tonight, we have 1710 on the agenda, and so we wanted to prioritize everyone who wanted to come speak on policy 1710 versus, other issues that they might be bringing to us, to make sure that we heard from everybody before a vote. Ms. Mahaffey.
Is this the discussion question? Because I have a question about
Question about your own motion.
my own motion. I do. In our current policy, it states that the chair has the authority to decide when that delineation will happen. The 30 minutes is just after 30 minutes, the chair may, and I'm not reading directly from our policy, split that. But is there something that we need to re-add into this in order to continue that? Or is that something that would just be allowed under practice and would not have to be in policy?
So I'll direct that to Mr. Malone.
I'm sorry, where?
So the question was, with the amended policy and the language, we have what's written here, but in practice, what we've been doing is where public comment has exceeded a certain amount of time, we've reserved the right to add it to the end of the business agenda. And Ms. Mahaffey's question is that we are splitting public comment into 2 periods, but would we still, let's say we had 60 speakers come out for on-agenda items, would we still have the ability to go an hour and then continue on with board business before going back to that? Or would these changes eliminate that practice?
No, I mean, I think as it's, with a change, it would say the board sets aside 2 public comment periods during each meeting, 1 prior to consideration of action items, and 1 at the conclusion of the board's business agenda.
Yes.
So we also, if you look at then in section 2, we have the language, speakers who are not reached during the first comment session will be called in priority order during the second public comment session. But because there's no time limit now, when would you have a situation when speakers in the first session aren't reached, unless you had the ability to go ahead with other board business?
So, I mean, as it is set now, the board or the chair would split it into the second period. I mean, you're removing the time to give yourself that flexibility. I mean, are you thinking that we need a sentence that would say that either the board, I mean, you could add a sentence to say that the board or the chair shall or may determine when to split it. I can come up with better language for the next.
Mr. Chair, if I
Yes,
may,
Ms. Mahaffey.
the current policy, and I will send this for policy 2310, says the board regularly sets aside 30 minutes for public comment. Unless the board extends this time, any speakers remaining at the end of the 30-minute period may be recognized at the conclusion of the board's business agenda. Each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes.
I mean, right, so I mean, maybe so the question is, I mean, you're somewhat going back to your original policy, which is fine.
I mean, I think, again, if I recall the discussion correctly, we had talked about giving the priority to the on-agenda items first, and then having a second public comment period, which wouldn't necessarily be at the end of the business agenda, because technically that could follow closed session, which, for example, speakers would have no idea how long the closed session would last when we were coming out of. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that it had a designated place on the agenda. But it's not quite the same as this part is the original policy. It does have that specific delineation, but we did have before, as Ms. Mahaffey said, the ability, if one part of the agenda was going on so long, that could be moved. As you see, speakers who are not reached during the first comment period will be called in priority order in the second public comment session. So, again, that's hard.
So, Matt,
Yeah.
Chair, So basically, what I'm looking at in my mindset is we're removing the barrier of the time, and I think we're going to use wisdom and discretion, I would say, by the chair, that if we recognize and we can observe what's going on, if it's longer than what we anticipate, we can inform the public. We're going to pause the public comment from here. We're going to go through with some other agenda items, and then we're going to bring it back. I think that a person in that leadership position would be of reasonable mind to understand when we need to shift or when we need to pivot.
Yeah.
But I think I'm in agreement to remove the time barrier from both policy pieces around the 30 minutes and use a reasonable person's thought process on when we need to pivot and shift.
Mr. Swanson?
I was caucusing with Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler, and Ms. Rice took everything that we were discussing over here, and so I just want to echo that as well. I do believe it's up to the chair's discretion. I think that so far, both chairs, former Chair Mahaffey and our current Chair Hegarty, have done a great job of using that discretion in determining when and if we need to pivot and whatnot. So I'm okay with that being up to the chair's discretion.
Thank you for that clarity, Ms. Rice. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Dr. Ng?
Well, I have the amazing ability to caucus remotely. So I agree. I think the chair has the ability to have the discretion based on the items on that list, the priorities, and how many people are on that list, and the time. So I think the time restraint should be lifted, but there is a kind of a time for, based on your judgment, to make that call, how to separate it.
Okay, thank you. So now the challenge is how we articulate that in policy. So I'm going to look to Mr. Malone, having synthesized all of this, for a coherent and pithy statement that will capture what we were trying to do.
So what we could do, since this is on for first reading, is you could approve it for first reading as discussed, and then you and I can work on some specific language that captures it for second reading. I think I do clearly understand. I think it'd be easier to wordsmith it outside of the meeting.
And that was my concern, whether we could get this just right at the board table, seeing some of these differences. So originally, the motion, we would have had a motion as we talked about it for first reading and a request to waive second reading, so this would be in effect at our next meeting. But given these concerns, and I think the need to get this right, I would be opposed to waiving second reading and proceeding as Mr. Maloney suggested. We'll vote tonight on the first reading, and then we'll come back with a second reading with this language adopted for everybody's review before we go forward. Does that sound like an approach? All right. Well, in that case, we have Ms. Mahaffey's motion on the table. It has been seconded. Mr. Swanson?
So once we receive the revisions, could we then waive that, if it passes or whatnot, could we waive it for it to go into effect at the next August meeting, that last meeting in August?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. Because once we pass it, it'll be policy on second reading, and second reading would take place at that August 6th meeting.
Gotcha. Just clarifying that. Thank you.
Okay. I just needed to say it out loud to make sure I understood it. Yeah. Trust me, I agree.
And do any motions need to be amended, given the
I don't believe
non-waiver
so,
of second
because
reading?
the motion, as I heard it,
I didn't say waiver of
did
second
not have the
reading.
waiver.
Okay.
So we would be
Just
in line.
making sure that is clear.
Yes. Okay. All right. And my computer still does not have the same list of policies. It is the 16th, right? Am I missing that? Yeah. Okay. All right. So all in favor of Ms. Mahaffey's motion to pass the amended version of Policy 2310 on first reading, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
We did.
Yeah, but her motion had the amendment. Yeah. It took out all the stuff you didn't like. Okay. All right. I'll call again. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so the motion will pass on second reading, and you all will see it again, tightened up on second reading. I'm going to ask Dr. Taylor here to continue on. All right, so the much more clear Board Policy 2340, if we open that, you'll see this is our order of business, and this specifically talks about putting discussion and approval of the agenda as the first item in our meetings following the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll determine our quorum, we say the pledge, then we'll have the discussion and approval of the agenda. Then, rather than going to board comments by the superintendent, we'll start with public comment, and then following public comment, we'll return to the comments of the superintendent, the board chair, and the board members. And those are the only changes in that policy, but those are the ones that we discussed. Mr. Hershey.
Shouldn't there be a second public comment in this order of business if we're going to have two like we just passed in first reading?
There should, and so order of operations, Mr. Malone, can we pass this one as is? Can we pass it to include the second public comment period when we haven't adopted the last policy on second reading yet?
Well, your current policy already allows for the second public comment. So I think if you want to go ahead now and insert the second public comment here, there's nothing inconsistent between your current policy and this change. And then the only thing that you'll be doing next time is adding the language about the board chair's flexibility to the other policy.
Okay. Then at that point, what I'd like to do is entertain any motion for adoption of the revised Policy 2340 as written, with the amendment that following item H, you see A1H, we would make the addition and renumber appropriately for I would be second public comment period. And then closed session as needed and adjournment.
Motion to approve with those amendments.
A motion for Mr. Swanson.
Second.
Second for Ms. Rice. All right, any further discussion? Ms. Mahaffey.
So I guess I was under the impression when we left, and I'm not going to hold this up, but I had thought that we would go from the pledge to recognition, information, and then public comment.
That actually is my recollection as well.
So I'd like to offer a friendly amendment.
And remember, we discussed this, and the rationale is that when we have, say, family members of a deceased member who are coming to be honored, or we have students making a student presentation, especially if it's a school night on a Tuesday, they should not have to wait an hour, 2 hours before it would come to them. So with your friendly amendment, we would move recognition to follow discussion approval of agenda?
Yes.
And then renumber accordingly. All right.
And information to follow recognition?
And information items would
follow recognition. 'Cause
follow recognition.
That is generally.
That also is usually when we have a guest coming in.
Yes,
Right.
or students.
All right. So here, because we did have a motion and a second, we will have to vote on the friendly amendment. So all in favor of Mr. Hershey's friendly amendment? Oh, she made the
okay.
amendment. Okay.
Team sport.
She amended her own amendment. So Mr. Hershey will be the second. All in favor of the amendment to the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now all in favor of the amended motion on first reading, and I didn't hear a request to waive second reading on this one. So we'll go ahead with the same rules in effect for our next meeting. All in favor of the amended Policy 2340, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. See, when you all showed up tonight, you didn't think this was going to be the big policy debate. I'd like to keep you on your toes. All right, now, next, I do have on my computer Policy 1710, Prohibition Against Discrimination, Harassment, Bullying, and First Reading. And so do we have Ms. Hill here? All right, great. All right, Dr. Taylor, I'm going to trust that I'm good from here on out. Nope, I don't. All right. All right, 1 second, Your Honor. All right. All right, thank you, Ms. Hill.
Good evening, board members, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Superintendent Taylor. We are here tonight to present the modifications to Policy 1710, the prohibition against discrimination, harassment, and bullying. Our recommendations with regard to the modifications are based upon the changes to the Title IX regulations which go into effect on August 1st. We have reviewed these changes with you all as a part of the policy committee, and we have made a few modifications since the policy committee that we discussed in committee, and have marked those here for your reference in on your computer version in highlighted yellow. As we discussed previously, the purpose of the changes were to clarify some of the language with regard to Title IX modifications. Additionally, we also changed the policy to separate some of the information regarding the Title IX standards as well as Title VII sex discrimination and sex-based harassment standards, so that we could more clearly organize that information for people to be able to see and read. One of the modifications that we made was with language in what you will see as number 4, A, dealing with quid pro quo harassment. I forget which board member, but there was a concern, Dr. Ng, there was a concern about use of the word impliedly, and we did change that to implicitly, such that it says explicitly or implicitly. Additionally, if you go to the next page, there are some modifications where we changed the word recipient to school system. The language here was reflecting some of the language directly in the Title IX, which talks about recipients, and we think it's just better to call ourselves school system rather than recipients. You'll see some changes to just some of the lettering, just for clarification in this policy. When you go to Section D, which deals with the next page, sexual harassment and employment under Title VII, as we discussed in policy committee, we struck a paragraph here that was moved to the beginning of the policy. I am not going through the specifics of everything in the policy, since we have talked about that previously, but I'm certainly open to any specifics that you'd like me to review or explain outside of what we discussed during the policy committee. As I said, we are recommending that we move forward with the changes as laid out during policy committee, so that we can be prepared to comply with the August 1st deadline for the Title IX changes, and for us to be able to implement those changes by that deadline.
All right. At this point, do we have a motion?
Second.
We have a motion from Ms. Edmonds, a second from Mr. Swanson. Any discussion? Dr. Ng.
Can you clarify the language of, under sex-based harassment, the language of nonverbal? What is that? How is that defined? What's an example of that?
Are you in the paragraph before this paragraph that starts sex-based harassment includes harassment on the basis? Okay. So in terms of acts of verbal or nonverbal or physical aggression, there are a lot of times when we talk about nonverbal, there are communications, actions via, not words, but via looks. I'm sorry, Mr. Hershey. Right, signals, gestures, things like that make it, that can in fact be harassing in terms of what is shown or displayed to someone. So often those are the types of nonverbal things that could constitute harassment. I don't want to demonstrate some of those things, but I think if you can imagine some gestures and things like that, that could be considered harassing in terms of what is presented there.
Follow-up?
Follow-up?
So has to be directed to the complainant, or would it be open to other people seeing it, those nonverbal expressions, and then that becomes a point of complaint?
I think it will depend specifically upon what that incident is. It's hard to really give an exact description of that. There are people who can make complaints because of concerns that they see with regard to sexual harassment. In fact, our policy, our direction to staff is, see something, say something, and we have obligations to report when we see things that may be considered harassment, discrimination, bullying, those sorts of things. So it is possible that someone could observe a nonverbal gesture and report that themselves, or it's possible that the person who is the recipient of a gesture or nonverbal communication could report that as well.
Any further questions, Dr. Green? All right. Other questions, comments? Ms. Rice?
For me, because this information is so prevalent and it does happen often, so these changes are necessary. I guess it's a question, but maybe a statement. Are we educating our students as well as staff to ensure the understanding of the violations of these policies and then providing maybe specific examples or case study scenarios? Because these changes, when we start talking about nonverbal and things of that nature, my only concern is to make sure that everyone is vividly aware of what this might look like. So that when people consider creating a complaint, they really do understand what that complaint really consists of and looks like, and they can kind of back it up, and to make sure that our staff really understands what this looks like, so that they can properly identify, for one, and then two, making sure that students try very hard not to violate this, because this is a change that's deeply ingrained sometimes in human behavior that they're not paying attention that they're doing. But changes like this to this policy really brings it out to show these are prevalent things that are really happening, but we've just done the wrong thing for so long. We want to make sure that people are very aware of what that looks like. And I'm sorry, that may be a whole lot in that, but that's really a concern with changing a policy like this and using the language that Dr. Ning brought out to make sure that our staff and our students are prepared of what that looks like.
So there is a process for training our staff, something that we've already had in place, and then something that we have in the past trained staff with regard to sexual harassment and what that is, and provided training for our staff. We have updated that training. Our attorneys worked to provide updated training, which has gone out to staff members already for this year. It does include scenarios, and one of the things we wanted to emphasize was not so much the legal language, but the types of things that staff need to see so that they can identify, report, intervene when they need to. So that was a specific request that we made in requesting, in looking at staff training when we did that this year. And those things were made within our staff training information.
Right, and I'm sorry, we're saying staff, But again, these policies affect staff and students.
Absolutely.
Students are learning, developing, and growing, and we need to make sure that they understand what this looks like and mean. So while staff may be trained to identify something that a student said, but has the student really been trained to understand that that's a thing that they can't say or do? So that's really my concern.
Understood. And I can't speak from the student side because I work on the personnel side. However, I will make a note of the fact that it is something we need to focus on, is making sure that students, and I believe they do, I don't see some of our counseling folks here, but I believe they do get some training with regard to these issues, but we certainly will make sure to note the need for ongoing training, scenarios, those sorts of things for students as well.
And Ms. Rice, what I wanted to add is that we will make sure that Michelle Woodson shares all of the things that we're doing in terms of what the work that we do with students, so you can be aware of that.
Thank you. Ms. Edmonds and then Ms. Caulfield.
Thank you. Dr. Hill, I don't know if this is for you or
No,
with
doctor, I'm sorry, I'm saying.
Ms.
Just Ms.
Hill.
Thank you.
Ms. Hill, I don't know if this is for you or one of the attorneys in the room, but we heard a lot of concern this evening about bathroom use, and can someone speak to the Gavin Grimm case and what the Fourth Circuit, how that is related to what we're doing with these three policies this evening?
So I'll give an overview, and then we can add one of our attorneys in as needed. As you heard, these regulations are not speaking to issues of bathroom use for in terms of what's required for us. In fact, our Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals already decided about bathroom use for transgender students, or bathroom use based upon a student's gender identity. That's something that's been a decision made 4 years ago by the Fourth Circuit, who identified under both Title IX as it existed, as well as under our Equal Protection Clause, that students were permitted to use bathrooms based upon their gender identity. What we're doing here does not impact that at all. That is already the law here in North Carolina based upon the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Any follow-up, or is that? Okay, thank you. That's Ms. Caulfield.
I just wanted to get clarity. We have two different policies, C and D, and I'm just trying to understand the difference. I'm reading through both of them. Unfortunately, one of the ones that I printed out does not have the changes that I see on here.
When you say C and D?
7230, or sorry, 1710 and 1720.
Okay. I can explain those, the difference between those two, and I will get to 1720 in just a moment. So 1710 is the policy that lays out the standards, what the board puts in place, what the board indicates, these are our expectations. We don't permit bullying. We don't permit harassing, discrimination, those sorts of things. Policy 1720 is the process that we use to investigate and review those claims of discrimination, harassment, bullying, hostile environment. So they work hand in hand, and often when we have someone who has a concern, we will send them both Policy 1710 and 1720, one which explains the standards, the prohibitions, the expectations, the other which explains the actual process that we will use to review an allegation.
Okay, so they both basically are the same information, just one is about the expectations and the other one is how we're going to carry it out. Am I understanding that correct?
One is, so if you look at Policy 1710, it talks about the prohibited behaviors. What are the things that the board says are not permitted within the school system? It talks about where are the places that this policy applies to. How do you go about reporting? What will be the consequences if you don't comply? What sort of training and those sorts of things do we require with regard to the policy and the expectations here? If you go to Policy 1720, it lays out mandatory reporting requirements. As I mentioned before, we as staff members are to report if we see concerns that violate those policies. It lays out how someone can file a complaint. Who will they speak with? What will the process be? This is where our different Title IX coordinators are oversee that process and review. It lays out how the investigation will work, what it happens there, what happens if someone doesn't agree with the investigation, what are the appeal processes. So all of that is Policy 1720, which is the discrimination, harassment, and bullying complaint process versus this policy 1710, which is a prohibition against discrimination, bullying, and harassment.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to clarify is I've made my point pretty clear before about the Title IX changes. I'm definitely against discrimination, harassment, and bullying, but I don't see a lot of the Title IX changes in this policy. Before I vote, I want to make sure that I'm voting for what I think.
Okay, thank you, understood. So the changes in, are you talking about 1720 or 1710? Okay, so in terms of 1710, we talked about and reviewed some of those modifications to the standards that are there, the language, the definitions, those sorts of things that are laid out in 1710. In 1720, there are just a couple of changes in 1720 to reflect some of the language. For example, instead of sexual harassment, we've changed language throughout to sex discrimination and sex-based harassment. We also identified the appropriate Title IX coordinator as the person who will receive complaints with regard to this. We have taken out the decision maker model here and proceeded with the single investigator model. And so we reference the appropriate Title IX coordinator, and we reference, as we always have, our Title IX complaint procedure, which is the more specific document about Title IX. It's an RMP that we have in place that we've provided to you for your information purposes. So there are few modifications to 1720. Those processes will continue as we have reviewed 1720 and those processes. The majority of changes here is to strike sexual harassment and change it to sex-based harassment and sex discrimination. 1720, yes, which is the procedures for investigating. And then to the extent that we are investigating Title IX, we have RMP that deals with those investigations. You're welcome.
I want to make sure we've gotten everybody who hasn't spoken a chance to speak first. Well, actually, I've got a few things I wanted to say as well. So all of, and Ms. Hill, some of this might be for you, but then some of this is just discussion for the board. And for the public. We as board members receive information from our attorneys about our legal responsibilities. And it's important to get public comment, to hear from people's concerns on both sides of the issue. And I think some people are coming with a lot of fears for their children, no matter which side. Will their rights be protected? Will their rights not be protected? One thing we've done on this board, and one thing that I remain committed to, has been following the law. And in North Carolina, as public officials, we have a statutory obligation to follow the law, whether or not we agree with the law. And we've seen cases of this where I know many of us disagree with the school calendar law. Some states decided to go out there and challenge that law, and you know what? They've been slapped down. We know a more equitable calendar would give us a lot of more educational opportunities, but we don't violate it because it would be breaking the law. We've heard from advocates about the Parents' Bill of Rights and things specifically related to Title IX that they object to, and we've been encouraged not to comply with the state law and wait to be sued. But we don't do that because this board has followed the law. Now, what we have here isn't a law of Congress. It is something coming down from the federal government. I wanted to challenge the contention that it is just one man's opinion. It is one man's opinion, but it does have the power of the executive branch behind it. Now, that might change as different executives change. But for right now, you have an actionable mandate from the federal government that has real consequences behind it, from fines, Office of Civil Rights complaints, forfeiture of our federal funding, that could all be consequences of not following the legal mandate. We remain under a legal obligation to adopt the revisions and policies to reflect the new Title IX requirements at every school right now except Ligon. And I also want to recognize that that could change as new schools might get added. I do have a question for Ms. Hill. We're not putting Ligon specifically in policy because of the injunction, right? We will have the policy, and then the injunction just overrides the policy. Is that correct?
So with regard to Ligon, we would presumably, if there was an issue, a concern, a claim made with regard to Ligon, we would follow the existing policy with regard to that, based upon that injunction in place.
So we can adopt the policy.
But I will let the board attorneys speak to that because, they're the ones that are the experts.
David, if you'd like to identify yourself.
Sure. David Nolan, one of the board attorneys that's worked on it.
And please come to the mic.
Sure. So the injunction doesn't prevent the policy from taking effect at Ligon. The injunction will only prevent the Department of Education from taking action to enforce it in any fashion.
Okay.
So the policy adoption would be across the district as it's being presented.
So if I understand right, as the legal case continues to evolve, other schools might be added to the injunction. The injunction is a temporary measure, and the actual case will be decided later on its merits. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's a preliminary injunction at this point. And the case is continuing on.
And so we do have a legal obligation right now to act before August 1, even knowing that things could change as the case develops.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So, again, this may or may not be the final version of the policy or the final action we're required to take, but it is something that we are legally obligated to do and to follow, or face the sanctions that we've talked about. The other two things that we talked about, that have been talked about today, that I wanted to address, Ms. Edmonds took on one of them, and that was the talk about the bathrooms. And what was referenced in that Gavin Grimm case. All members of the board have been informed by our attorneys that the questions about which bathrooms transgender students have a right to use was conclusively decided by the Court of Appeals. Now, you can check me, and I'll hear from you, because I'll listen to you. But for the information I have right now, because it was decided by the Fourth Circuit unanimously and the Supreme Court didn't take it up, it would remain law of the land. Again, we know that Supreme Court opinions can shift. But the best legal information we have right now, and the information from our counsel, is that right now, the new Title IX regulations and the proposed board policies do not reference bathrooms, and the law of the land right now would supersede any policy that we might have one way or the other. What we've also talked about, and what we heard from the attorneys about, I guess what people have shared some concerns about was sports. And I just wanted to be clear on that. The advice that we've been given was that neither of the proposed policies that have come up specifically address transgender student participation in interscholastic sports. There's a different regulation that the federal government's been considering. We were informed it was about maybe a year away. It's still in the public comment period. And we would have to review that when that came up. But currently, what we're being asked to adopt by the federal government does not address sports. And again, we currently have state law. State law requires interscholastic middle and high school teams to be designated as either male, female, or co-ed, where those terms are defined by reference to biological assigned sex. And it does not allow male students to participate on designated female teams. And so following this advice, as it is right now, that would not require us to change or to violate state law. We would still have state law which would separate those teams by male or female, or if a team is designated as co-ed. So that wouldn't change with adoption of these policies. That's the advice we've been given, and I know that there's a lot of information about this that's out there. Some of it's conflicting. Again, I'm willing to listen if there's conflicting legal arguments on that, but this is the advice that our council has given us. So, I think some of the fears that have been expressed may not apply in concerns of fears about bathroom use, fears about sports and athletics. I think those are policy questions, and I appreciate people bringing those to our attention, but I don't think adoption of these policies and following this federal guidance will result in those fears coming to light. And I think we have a legal obligation to follow the law or face these sanctions. So that's where I am as I consider these issues. And again, this has been the advice that all of our board members have been given. It's okay if you disagree with that on a policy issue, but I want to make sure that we follow the advice of our attorneys and, we do the right thing and we vote with correct and accurate information. So, other board member comments or questions? Dr. Ng?
I've kind of implied this, but we are kind of putting the cart before the horse in implementing a policy change when the actual Title IX regulations that are still kind of in play out there in legal world. So in essence, we're basically making these changes because we want to make these changes, correct?
I would contest that, but I would defer to our attorneys. I believe, from our advice, we're under a legal obligation, recognizing that that obligation could change as the case changes, right? If the regulations are overturned or thrown out, we might be back here with a different policy. But as I understand it with the advice we've been given, I think we are under a legal obligation. But I'll defer to counsel because I don't want to I don't want to be and Vice Chair Johnson Hustler reminds us we also do not have a board meeting before the 1st, so we won't have any other opportunity to comply with the mandate other than our vote tonight.
I'll just add on that the injunction doesn't stop the rule from going into effect as of August 1st. As I mentioned before, it enjoins the enforcement by the Department of Education in certain specific schools or certain states, but it doesn't stop the actual adoption of the rule, which, as of now, the Department of Education has not indicated it's walking back the rule in any way, so it's still set to go into effect as of August 1st.
Thank you. Any further questions or follow-up? Mr. Hershey.
When we get federal rules like this, and do they often give us dates when they have to be in place?
Yes.
When we get federal rules like this, does your office review them to see how our policy matches up with it?
Yes, we receive information from our attorneys, sometimes information from the School Boards Association, recommendations. But yes, we gather that information and we are provided direction and guidance and suggestions with regard to complying with the law.
Personal feelings ever cause us to change policy coming from your office, or is it just following the federal or state law as provided?
When we receive
a federal,
modifications,
yes,
we follow those modifications.
whether or not you agree with it, correct?
Yes.
I call the question.
Okay, there's been a motion to call the question, so this will cut off debate and take us to a vote. Dr. Hill, Ms. Hill, did you have? I was turning that JD into a doctorate.
We would request that this be, that the second reading be waived because of the August 1st deadline and the fact that there is not another board meeting prior to that time period.
Okay, thank you. I don't believe the original motion contained that waiver of second reading. Would we? You have called the question. The call of the question is to close debate.
Chair Haggerty, if it's appropriate, I can change my motion.
All right, I'm going to ask Mr. Malone for his parliamentary interpretation. There has been a call for the question.
Right, so just technically, so we're all on the same page, that's a motion to call the question. It requires a second. It requires a vote. If the majority of the board votes to end discussion, then you would vote on the actual underlying motion.
Okay.
The calling of the question by itself does not end debate.
It's simply moving the previous question, and that
Correct.
requires a two-thirds vote, according to our parliamentary chart right
Okay,
here.
then if that's what it says,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
I'll second it, Mr. Chair.
All right. So before you second the call for question, well, you've already done it, so I was going to see if we could amend the motion as Ms. Edmonds had intended, but we have a motion to cut off debate.
Correct.
And the original maker of the motion has offered to amend her motion.
What I think is because the motion has been made to end debate, we would proceed, if we proceed to a vote on the motion to call the question. If that passes by a two-thirds majority, we would then vote. However, I think it would be in order to then come back and make a motion to waive second reading, just following that, and that might get us to where I think people want to go. Okay?
Chair,
Yes,
does that
ma'am.
mean that that ends conversation?
It does, if the motion passes.
So that's it, just cut off all conversation about that.
If two-thirds of the people vote in favor of ending debate.
And if somebody else had a motion to actually offer, then that's not,
At this point, that would be out of order. Am I correct, Mr.
If
Malone?
the- Yes, if the motion to call the question is seconded and it passes, then that would end the debate. But those are steps that have to occur before debate ends. If the motion to call the question does not pass, then debate continues.
Okay. Is everyone clear? All right, and we're going to do this by roll call vote to make sure that there's no question of the number. We'll start with Mr. Hershey.
Aye.
Dr. Ing.
Nay.
Ms. Edmonds.
Nay.
Ms. Mahaffey.
Aye.
Chair will vote nay. Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler.
Aye.
Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Ms. Caulfield.
definitely a nay.
And Ms. Rice.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so I have a vote of 5-4. It does not receive the two-thirds vote. And so the debate has not ended. So is there further comment or further debate on the policy? Ms. Caulfield.
So I just wanted to add a couple of things, food for thought. I know that it was said that I was providing misinformation. I never said that the girl that was sexually assaulted, that's not misinformation. She was sexually assaulted. That is absolutely a fact. And she is not the first girl by that boy. I never said that he was transgender. I never even said that he was wearing a skirt. We just know he was. The whole point of that was that that shared space created an opportunity for harm to come to that girl. If they were to have a separate stall, and that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you, is if we have to abide by these federal mandates or rule, is it possible that we could change the wording to accommodate what it is that they're trying to get at, but with our own words?
We'll direct that toward Ms. Hill.
So if you all will recall from our policy meeting, one of our attorneys was there who talked about the wording of this language, and I think her succinct statement was very helpful. You know, it's the law, and so what we're doing is reflecting the law. And one of the concerns is that if we start changing the wording, we make ourselves more vulnerable to challenges that we are not complying with the legal requirements. We have implemented requirements that are different than those legal requirements, and that puts the board more at risk. So the wording here really is consistent with the law that the regulations that we've received.
So if I understand correctly, you can have several attorneys interpreting the law and what it means in different ways. Let me give you an example for one thing. The new rule does affect athletics because it redefines discrimination in all applications of Title IX. But yet we have another attorney that's saying that the sports are not included, and that it says something different. So that is my concern. And it's a little bit more about not the sex-based harassment. So what I was asking, the reason why I was asking is if I could make a motion to include language that would make it clear what sex-based harassment is not. And then the four things that I would focus on with that would be that sex harassment shall not include the refusal to use preferred pronouns based on the First Amendment objections, segregation of sexes based on biology for overnight trips, assignments for sleeping, and to include locker rooms, bathrooms, and showers, and also for gym classes. So those four categories will actually ensure the safety of all of our children, women and trans. But then we're also abiding by all of what the law is saying, by they're not allowed to sexually harass, discriminate, or bully. Is that something that we can do?
Is that a question or is that a motion?
Well, I said I would like to make a motion. I guess I need to make that a little bit more formal. So
Okay.
I would like to make a motion that we would include that language to be clear what sex-based harassment is not.
So if you'd like to do that, I would ask that you do it formally, looking at the policy and telling me where you would like that language, and then we'll see if it gets a second. And then if it does, we can have any discussion or a vote on the motion.
Okay, so that goes back to my question before with the policy 1710. It seems like it would fall within that, because that, you mentioned, was our standards and expectations. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So then, you're asking what number I would want it to be in? So I would say that it would be under where sex harassment is on number 4.
Okay.
And I guess we would add it underneath number 6 since they are listing out.
Okay, I see several definitions. I want to make sure that
Yeah.
when you say 6, I know what you're talking about. Section 4, I see the following constitutes sex-based harassment. There's an A, B, A1, B2, A, B, C, D, E. I don't see I don't see a 6. Do you see it? Okay. Yeah, so the 6 had been struck through. Do you want to just add it at the end of the section, or is there some other place you would put it?
Okay, so I don't have that struck through. Let me pull it up here, sorry. I think I printed it out before it got updated. Item A. So I originally had it for number 3, but it looks like there's all different ones here. So I'm going to say conduct on the basis of sexual satisfies one of the following. Well, actually, I'm not going to ask it to be put under there because it's not fitting the way that it's worded. So if it would be under item number 4, under sexual harassment, as a separate paragraph.
It is a separate paragraph. All right. So then, to be clear, in that section 4, you just add it as a separate paragraph at the end of the section? Okay, can you read the language that you are proposing?
Yes. That sex-based harassment shall not include a refusal to use preferred names and pronouns based on First Amendment objections. So that would be the first part. The second part would be, in the interest of safety and privacy, sex-based harassment shall not include segregation of sexes based on biology for overnight trips, room assignments for sleeping.
Any
And then
others,
in-
or is that?
Yeah, and then in the interest of safety and privacy, sex-based harassment shall not include segregation of sexes based on biology for locker rooms, bathrooms, and shower rooms. And we could add them together because it does have the first part of the sentence is exactly the same. I was just separating the locker rooms, bathrooms, and showers from the overnight sleeping. And then also based on biology for gym classes.
All right. So do we have the language for the motion? Making sure our folks have recorded it. All right, the motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion or any debate? Ms. Edmonds?
Ms. Hill, and aren't these definitions of sex discrimination, et cetera, set by statute? And do we have the ability to change them?
The definitions of what is sex harassment or sex-based harassment that we have, the following conduct constitutes sex harassment or sex-based harassment, those are set by the statute in terms of what constitutes sex harassment or sex-based harassment. The language in here with regard to the pregnancy-related conditions, sexual orientation, gender orientation, those things are a part of the definitions that are laid out in the federal regulation.
Go ahead.
I guess I'm just wondering if we even have the ability to adopt something that, such as Ms. Caulfield is suggesting. Would that violate statute, is my question.
So I'll refer to our attorneys to respond to that in terms of the details there. It's not clear to me that the language here is something that is specifically prohibited by the statutes, but it's also, I mean, I've not had a chance to look at it to see if this is something that would be inconsistent with the regulations as they have been passed already. So I can certainly see if our attorneys have any familiarity with language similar to this that, you know, has been discussed, or if there is any specific thought with regard to those elements.
So I don't view it as my role to say what the board can and cannot do in terms of adding that. I would say that I think these definitions as put in the proposed policy are taken from the regulations. I think some of the proposed language might be inconsistent with some of the language that's present in the regulations, and with, as discussed earlier, the Grimm case and how that applies in North Carolina. So I do think that there might be a risk of potential liability there.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Ms. Simmons? Any further discussion or debate? Mr. Swanson?
I just had a question as well, like kind of similar to Ms. Edmonds, because I just remember taking the oath of office for this that said, you know, we will support and maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States and the Constitution and laws of the state of North Carolina, not inconsistent therewith, and that we will faithfully discharge our duties of Wake County Board of Education members. So with that Constitution, our oath of office being stated, does this proposed amendment violate the North Carolina Parental Bill of Rights? Or does this language even align with that? Because I don't want to violate any potential state laws or whatnot. So I guess that's a question for one of the attorneys.
I can, and with the caveat I'm being asked to render an opinion off the cuff on it, I don't think that any of the proposed amended language would run afoul of the Parental Bill of Rights. I think there's some overlap, but nothing inconsistent. Is my measured response to that.
All right, Mr. Hershey?
Just a suggestion, and take it or leave it, but perhaps Ms. Caulfield would consider submitting this to the attorneys and then us following up with this specific motion or the language in the next policy committee meeting, so they have time to vet it to make sure we're not violating any state or federal laws with it, since we're asking them to make a change and pass something pretty quickly. But I'll leave that to Ms. Caulfield.
Ms. Caulfield?
Just to understand what you were saying, are you saying go ahead with the vote today to be timely for August 1st and then bring it back to policy to make those changes?
Yes. So we would vote basically without we would vote down your motion now, and then you would submit that language for attorneys to review and for staff to review, and then have the conversation at the next policy meeting based on what their reading of the state and federal law is, whether it would be permissible to add any of the language that you are suggesting. And that way, we'd be bringing this back in a month or so.
So if I understand it correctly, you were saying that the verbiage is not necessarily violating anything, but here we are trying to make a policy with a whole lot of changes pending and happening that we really have no idea what's going to happen, what schools are included or anything, but yet we're going to pass a policy. So I understand where you're coming from with that, but
Right.
I'm saying we're kind of contradicting why we're voting.
So I think if I understood Mr. Hershey, we have a legal mandate to follow that will be enforced against us if the changes are not made by August 1. Now, post-August 1, things could change, right? The court case could have a change. You could have different federal mandates come down. A lot of things could change, but right now, I believe, because we have a mandate that can be enforced against us with real sanctions if we don't comply by August 1, Mr. Hershey is saying, let's go ahead and, if I'm mischaracterizing it, let's go ahead and do this, but then after that's in place, if we've had the attorneys being able to provide counsel and direction on additional changes you might want to make, whether or not, we don't want to go ahead and pass something, in my opinion, that would not comply with the mandate, go home, and then not come back until August 6th and find out we've been in violation and the enforcement actions could be taken against us. Would you have something in place and you all want to have further discussion on this, we can certainly do that. I mean, I have some real reservations about the amendment, and as it is right now, I likely wouldn't support it. But, you know, if you want to have more research done and bring it back in policy, we could do that. But did I accurately characterize that? Okay. So, you know,
I just spent a lot of time
Yeah.
since policy meeting speaking to attorneys, reading things, going over things and everything. So I think I was getting a different interpretation. So I'm kind of going to stick with my original motion.
Okay, all right. Well, and thank you, Mr. Hershey, for the suggestion. I will say, I'm against the amendment. I think there's certain things here. You can't take language that, you can't say we have a policy following a federal mandate against discrimination or harassment, and then say, but it's not going to apply to pronouns or other things because of First Amendment rights. Because if the First Amendment would protect your speech in that situation, why wouldn't it protect your speech in any harassment situation? And then what would make harassment of one protected class different than harassment of a separate protected class? That's just not. I don't follow that legally. I just don't think we can do that. Again, I could be wrong, but to me, by the very nature of defining harassment and how harassment's been defined, simply claiming the First Amendment as a defense is just not adequate. And again, I'll go back to the questions that we have about the segregation of locker rooms and bathrooms. I believe these are covered by other state laws. And, you know, if it comes down that we have conflicting federal guidance and mandates that come down, we'll have to weigh those and see what the conflict is between state law and the federal guidance. But I would not be in favor of the amendment. I do understand your concerns and why you've put that forward. I just personally don't think it's good policy. Any further comment? All right. All in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Nay.
Nay.
All right, the amendment fails. Thank you, though, Ms. Caulfield. All right, Mr. Hershey.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment to waive second reading for, who made the amendment?
Ms. Mahaffey, I believe, or Ms. Edmonds?
For Mr. Edmonds' motion, a friendly amendment to waive second reading.
Second.
Okay. There's a motion to amend the amendment to include a waiver of second reading. It has been moved and seconded for discussion. I will say that will allow us to go ahead and comply with the mandate by August 1. All in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So by my count, a vote of 7-2. We have amended it to waive second reading. All right. Final motion on the table, as written and amended, would be the adoption of policy 1710 as amended with a waiver of second reading. Are we ready for a vote? All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? I have 2 votes nay. Is that accurate? All right. By a motion of 7-2, policy 1710 has been adopted. We'll now move to policy 1720. Thank you. Dr. Hill? Sorry, dang it. You know, I happen to...
I'm going to work on that. I'll go ahead and...
Kendra Hill has had an illustrious career, and I don't know if everyone knows all of the different roles that you've had in government and the court system here with us. If doctor is the worst thing that we can say about you, I hope you see that as a compliment.
In some places, it's the doctor, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you lead us through 1720, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair Haggerty. As I mentioned in speaking with Ms. Caulfield, policy 1720 is our complaint procedure with regard to discrimination, harassment, and bullying. We have minor modifications to this policy. It is to change instances of sexual harassment to read sex discrimination or sex-based harassment. We also included in here that reports should be made to the appropriate Title IX coordinator, and that any process for what happens after those reports are made will be based upon our Title IX complaint procedure, which is an RMP that we have for Title IX. Throughout this policy, again, there are several places where the policy used sex harassment, and we've changed that. I mean, sexual harassment, and we've changed that to sex-based harassment. That is the change within this policy. It is very limited.
All right. Is there a motion?
Second.
Motion for Mr. Hershey, second for Mr. Swanson. Any questions for Ms. Hill? Any discussion or debate? Ms. Mahaffey?
I'd like to make a friendly amendment that we also waive second reading on that.
Is there a second to the second friendly amendment?
Second.
Second from Mr. Swanson. All in favor of the amendment to the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, I'm recording that as 7-2. All right, the motion has been amended to add waiver of second reading. We're back to the original motion. Any questions, any debate? Dr. Ng.
The language of having an oral or written request, that comes from Title IX regulations, is that correct?
Dr. Ng, yes, that is in Title IX regulation. I'm not sure where you're pointing to in policy 1720. Are you looking at 1720?
Underneath definitions.
Yeah.
Section 2
definitions.
complaint.
Right, yeah. Under definition A2, complaint.
Oh, okay. So if those are things that are already in our policy. That's already, this has been our complaint procedure for 1720. We have not modified that with regard to this. Oral or written notification is the process for someone to make a complaint. As we process those, we try to gather more information, requests that folks write down more details, but the complaint can be made orally or in writing.
Just follow up.
Please.
So that means that there is a paper trail in the process of the complaint, correct?
Well, so.
And where does it start?
Ultimately, there will always be a paper trail because we're gathering information.
Right.
So it depends how a complaint comes in. I can give example, but it will differ in every situation. But if there is a verbal complaint that is made, then the Title IX coordinator will follow up to gather more information. Often that follow-up is done via email. It also may be done via a phone call, but then confirmed in email once that information is gathered. So ultimately, yes, there will be paper related to the complaint because that's just the nature of how the investigators often will interact. And then there are also, people also are able to file something more specific if they want to, fill out information to file a complaint if they want to. But if it's an oral complaint, we can and do ask for more information, confirm that information, try to make sure we have the correct concern that's being investigated.
Another follow-up.
Please.
So based on another part of it in page 16, I believe, where it says, I do appreciate where it says that both sides get to access to the evidence and opportunity to respond to the evidence. Page 16.
So
I'm sorry. I was using a different version. Sorry.
Dr. Ng, let me clarify. I understand here. What you're looking at in page 16 is a copy of the information, I believe, provided as information with regard to the specific Title IX complaint procedures. Policy 7, that's an R&P that we have in place for our Title IX complaint procedures.
Okay.
R&P 1720, R&P 1 that you're looking at is specific to Title IX. Policy 1720 is how we handle other discrimination, harassment, bullying, hostile environment complaints that don't fall under that specific Title IX procedure. So I apologize for the confusion. We provided that to you all for information purposes, but 1720 is the policy that we're requesting that you all approve.
It's basically just a statement that that I appreciate that both sides will get information about the actual complaint. Is that true?
Yes, that's correct.
So and that I think is something that is needed, obviously, and so that's why I was asking about the paper trails, so that people would have an understanding of where that complaint came from.
Understood.
Right?
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you. Ms. Mahaffey.
Thank you. So, Ms. Hill, what you're saying is 1720, the paragraph that we're changing is just saying if you have a Title IX complaint that would fit in this here, you need to go to this separate policy.
R&P.
RMP, yes, okay.
For the procedure to investigate the complaint.
All right, thank you.
All right, any other further questions, further comments on policy 1720? All right, at this point, I'll take a vote. All in favor of adoption of policy 1720 on first reading with waiver of second reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, by a vote of 7-2, the policy passes on first reading with waiver of second reading. All right, that concludes our action agenda. We have a motion from Mr. Hershey to go into closed session. I believe I heard Ms. Caulfield, or no, apologies to both. Mr. Swanson is a second. All in favor of the motion to move into closed session for the statutory reasons cited in the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're in closed session. Thank you all very much.